became the feeling you
You're watching TBPN. Today is Thursday, May 15, 2025. It never gets old.
It never gets old.
From the Temple of Technology,
the Fortress of Finance, the capital of capital.
We're a little bit brighter today. We're warming things up.
Look at us.
More welcoming to the guests, more welcoming to the fans, more welcoming to the viewers. We got a great show for you today, folks. Let's pull up the graphic to show you who's coming on. We got Delian from Founders Fund, Alex from Worldcoin, Josh Wolfe from Lux Capital, Jason Fried from 37 Signals, and Eugenia from Replika.
Quite the eclectic group.
Yeah, we really put together.
Not the five people
There's
you
some
would
crypto
normally
in
see
there.
on
There's
a
some
single
venture
show.
capital in there. There's some AI in there. There's some 37 Signals is just like a legendary tech company, but has built outside of the venture capital world, going back to back with a venture capitalist.
Yep.
Kind of sworn enemies in some ways.
Very true. Very true.
It should be fun. Anyway,
I'm excited to ask Jason, what do you love about the current state of startups?
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll have an answer.
Yeah.
But I'm sure.
I mean, we were talking about this earlier, just this idea of like, there are startups out there right now. Everyone knows that they're good businesses, but they shouldn't raise venture capital. He's kind of the king of the company that didn't need to raise venture capital. And I feel like that message needs to be out there for entrepreneurs, not for VCs, because they're going to earn their fees no matter what, even if they pump it into a company that,
they need to deploy.
Yeah, and they should avoid backing companies that don't need venture capital and just stuffing the goose like it's foie gras.
Yeah.
But
I would like to see a scaled platform VC, make Basecamp an offer they can't refuse, and then invest $500 million into the company, and then try to IPO it.
It just becomes the most
overcapitalized
company
of all time.
SoftBank comes in, puts in.
There's always a number. They've been
a
offered a bunch over the years and always turned it down. But
I think
everybody's got a number.
For 37 Signals, it's not a matter of the number. It's the matter of there needs to be a car above the Aston Martin Valkyrie. So as long as the founders can afford Valkyries, they don't need to do the
There's
deal.
no incentive.
But if Aston Martin were to drop a car maybe at the $300 million mark, all of a sudden it's a conversation.
It would definitely start a conversation.
Anyway, we have an exclusive in the Wall Street Journal from Warren Buffett. He has
in many ways it's our exclusive now. We have the only copy of this newspaper.
We do. It's not breaking news until it's on TBPN. That's what we like to say.
This edition of the journal is almost like an NFT. They're only making
one of this exact physical copy.
Yeah.
Anyway, Warren Buffett has given an exclusive interview to the Wall Street Journal, and I thought it was just a fantastic. The way that they quoted him was particularly interesting. So basically, they're trying to dive into why did Warren Buffett retire? Why did he hand the reins to Greg Abel? The answer should be kind of obvious, but Buffett is revealing that it was because of his age. He's starting to feel old for the first time, and so he's 94, and he gave the top job to Greg Abel, and he says. In recent years, Buffett has finally observed how much energy his appointed successor brought to each working day and how he had his own days had slowed. The two men were operating at different speeds, increasingly slow. I see you over the...
I was hovering over the golden retriever mode.
Okay.
But I'm not going to hit it.
There
'cause
was
it
no
didn't feel
magic
right.
moment. Buffett, now 94, said in an interview with the Wall Street Journal, how do you know the day when you become old? Berkshire shareholders and onlookers have long wondered how anyone could replace Buffett, for decades a towering figure in American business and finance. But as he passed his 90th birthday, Buffett began to experience something most people come to accept much earlier in life, his age.
And this quote really stood out. He says, "I didn't really start getting old for some strange reason until I was about 90." He said by phone from his office in Omaha. He's not using Zoom, to be clear here. But when you start getting old, it does become, it's irreversible.
Use of the M dash, which has been controversial because ChatGPT loves to throw an M dash around.
But he was on the phone.
Yeah.
Maybe he prompted this response.
Yeah, maybe they were talking to 11 Labs,
verbally
actually.
said, M dash, it's irreversible.
Yeah. No, but the M dash is interesting here because they're quoting him so directly. It would have been very easy for them to rewrite that quote as but when you start getting old, it's irreversible, right? Just take out the little misstep in the sentence. But they didn't do that. They quoted him directly and they said, but when you start getting old, it does become, it's irreversible. And so they're recreating exactly what happened on that phone call. And I thought it was almost like an emotional moment because it's the quote, he's saying that he's aging, but the quote is so direct, it's showing that he's aging.
Totally.
So that was very interesting.
And they give some more context here. He began to lose his balance occasionally and sometimes had trouble recalling a person's name. Suddenly, the newspapers he read looked like they were printed with too little ink.
Brutal. In the past year, those
sad,
thoughts
but
and
it's also
feeling-
natural.
I mean, he's 94.
Yeah.
He's been on a generational run. On May 3rd at the Berkshire annual meeting, Buffett stunned in the investing world when he revealed in the final minutes of his question and answer session his plan to step down as CEO in December and make way for Abel. Those filling the arena in Omaha fell silent as Buffett
Abel,
spoke.
who's in his 60s,
Yeah.
which means that he
62.
could potentially go on a 3-decade run
Yeah.
just to get where Buffett is today.
Yeah. And so there's a whole bunch of backstory that we've already covered here, but he says the difference in energy level and just how much he could accomplish in a 10-hour day compared to what he could accomplish in a 10-hour day, compared to what I could accomplish in a 10-hour day, the difference became more and more dramatic. So Buffett's just seeing that Abel is more capable of running the business for these long days. He was just so much more effective at getting things done, making changes in management where they were needed, helping people that needed help someplace, but just all kinds of ways. It was unfair, really, not to put Greg in the job. The more years that Berkshire gets out of Greg, the better.
Yeah, and this wasn't fully priced in. You saw this in the market. The
Yeah.
stock dropped.
Yeah.
A lot of people said, why weren't people expecting this, right? He's 94.
Yeah.
And overall, I think the execution on the news was
Yeah.
smooth, right? He didn't say, I'm stepping down on Monday. This is clearly, I imagine he would want to keep going, but he understands that it's the best for the shareholders, which he has devoted his entire life to.
Well, if Greg Abel wants to cut those 10-hour days to just 8-hour days, he should get on Ramp, save time and money.
Today we are talking about
You gonna play the Ramp song?
Ramp.
Keep doing the read.
Ramp. Easy to use corporate cards, bill payments, accounting, and a whole lot more all in one place. Go to ramp.com and start saving time and money.
Thank you to Ramp for sponsoring the show.
Anyway, Brian Chesky is in the news with Airbnb. Airbnb is in midlife crisis mode. He announced Airbnb 2.0 and did a piece with Stephen Levy in Wired, kind of breaking it all down. And Ben Thompson dropped a great analysis. And so can we play the clip of Brian Chesky giving his keynote address? Brian Chesky last year came out with kind of the inspiration for Founder Mode, which Paul Graham catalyzed into an essay. But Brian Chesky really said that if you're running a company, even if you're not a product company that's releasing a new iPhone every year, you should drive your software company to annual releases and start thinking in annual cycles. We've seen Flexport pick that up. We saw Figma
And
do
he
that.
did that to sabotage upstarts that want to compete with Airbnb by saying, hey, just ship once a year.
Just ship once a year
Ship
instead
once
of
a year.
every week.
Don't ship weekly. Don't ship daily. Just
It is some
get
game-
on
the
get on
game
my
theory of
program.
this is good. Yeah.
No, it's good. It's
Yeah.
good. He's an absolute dog.
Yeah. Anyway, let's hear it from him about his plan for Airbnb 2.0.
What we're building is much more than a travel app. It's a global community. in the real world, where you can travel anywhere, live anywhere, and belong anywhere. This is what we're building. And to think it all started with an airbed.
Pretty good presentation style. It's a little slow for my taste. I prefer him when he's off script and just riffing and high energy, but I get that the audience is different there.
Riffing, high energy.
Yeah. Plenty of allegations.
Plenty of
about that,
allegations, which we won't discuss.
But I think he's clearly presenting, I mean, it's a big moment, right? He's transforming Airbnb into something new, and
Totally.
it's risky. And so he needs to send the message to the investing community. I mean, it's a public company. He needs to send the message that he's a steady hand on the tiller through this, new version.
Yeah, and he's just very clearly a student of Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Like, this feels like
Totally.
an Apple keynote
Yeah.
from 15 years ago.
Yeah. And so
And that's okay. It's
in
not the most original, but it's
an effective communication
it's
style.
effective, and it comes off as serious of a company as they are.
Yeah. So the Wired piece starts by telling an anecdote about Brian Chesky. It says, the reinvention of Airbnb started with the coup at OpenAI. On November 17th, 2023, the board of OpenAI fired company CEO Sam Altman. His friend Chesky leapt into action, publicly defending his pal on X, getting on the phone with Microsoft CEO, and throwing himself into the thick of Altman's battle to retake OpenAI. 5 days later, Altman prevailed, and Chesky, I was so jacked up, he says, turning his buzzing mind to his own company, Airbnb. Thanksgiving weekend was beginning. The Chesky extended family had already held their turkey get-together a week earlier. Interesting. He celebrates it early. And the Airbnb CEO had no
Did it give
holiday
any
plan.
context there?
No.
He was just like, I want to be grinding while my enemies are enjoying
this-
their turkey dinner.
Is this like some contrarian alpha that we're finding right now? Just have Thanksgiving a week early? So he has no holiday plan, so everyone else is off, so he can just work, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess, it is a Thursday. And so if you just have Thanksgiving on the Saturday previously,
The alternative is that Airbnb
days.
gets so hectic around holidays
True,
that maybe
true,
he
true.
wants to just be very online in the office.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean,
during
it's
those
like
moments.
Black Friday, or a lot of D2C entrepreneurs are working over Black Friday, Cyber Monday. The holiday rush is certainly busy at most consumer companies, anything that's being gifted. So yeah, maybe he's just learned that he's got to be online then. Anyway, he was completely alone in his sprawling San Francisco apartment, except for Sophie, his golden retriever. Let's hear it for golden retriever mode.
Activate golden retriever mode.
I love golden retrievers. We saw some at the Jet Suite X terminal in Oakland.
A couple.
A couple beautiful dogs. Look at that dog.
John was basically having
That's
a full-on
amazing.
conversation with these two golden retrievers, and the owners were not having it.
They're like, leave
They
us
were like,
alone.
"What are you doing?"
Like,
And
I feel like if you
I-
bring dogs
I-
to the airport, it's open season.
Yeah.
People can pet your dog if you're in a public place like that. Anyway, still wired out of his mind from the cathartic corporate rescue, Chesky began to write. He wanted to bust the company he'd co-founded out of its pigeonhole of short-term home rentals. Amazon, he was fond of pointing out, was first an online bookstore before it became the everything store. Chesky had long believed that Airbnb should expand in a similar way. So what is Airbnb's market cap right now? Can you look that up?
So this is
Public.com?
what's really interesting.
Yeah.
So they are an $84 billion company right now, but they are down across the lifetime of the company.
Yeah, they've
So
kind of been.
they
I mean,
are
there was the
down-
COVID up and down.
They're they're down 1.6%. So if you bought Airbnb shares 5 years ago,
Yeah.
you would be
This is the
Yeah.
story of Snapchat. This is the story of a lot of the non-hyperscaler tech companies that got out, and they're fantastic companies. I mean, nothing to be upset about if you're running an $85 billion company, but growth is addictive, and growth is what everyone wants. And if you're not growing, you're stagnant. And
as a
that's-
former bodybuilder, this is like him sitting at 255,
Yeah.
benching 4 plates
Yep.
for reps,
Yeah.
but not able to break that ceiling.
never
right?
get the not.
But the
making it
chart
part of
looks like a
classic.
kangaroo.
It does.
It
just
looks
up and
like a
down, up and
kangaroo,
down.
up and down, up and down, up and
Okay.
down. Never really built massive momentum.
Yeah, and not compounding anymore in the way he wants, so he needs to find a second act.
Yep.
And so Chesky had long believed that Airbnb should expand in a similar way, but things kept getting in the way, dealing with safety issues, fighting regulation, coping with the existential crisis of a global pandemic. The company was in danger of being tagged with the word that ambitious entrepreneurs dread like the plague: mature. Now Chesky was emboldened to lay out his vision. Home rentals are simply a service. Why stop there? Airbnb could be the platform for booking all sorts of services, while other apps cover specific sectors: food delivery, home maintenance, car rides. Chesky figured that Airbnb's experience in attractively displaying homes, vetting hosts, and responding to crises could make it more trustworthy than competitors, and therefore the go-to option for virtually anything. In a frantic typing spree at the dining room table, on the couch, the bed, and at times his office, Chesky specced out how he would redesign the Airbnb app. Its users now at 2 billion. Wow, that's a lot of users. I had no idea. Would open up the app not only at vacation time, but whenever they needed to find a portrait photographer, a personal trainer, or someone to cook their meals. Chesky reasoned that Airbnb would need to significantly strengthen its identity verification. He even thought he could get people to use the app as a credential, something he's as respected as a government-issued ID, if he could transform Airbnb into a storefront for real-world services.
It's amazing because I feel like seed stage founders go through this type of brainstorm in a very equally frantic way.
Yep.
But usually they don't have an $85 billion company yet. Usually it's more like they're thinking through their, fundraising pitch deck, and they're like, oh, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this.
Yep.
He actually now has earned the right to think at this scale, right? Being already, 2 billion users, global company. I think he's in a great position to think a lot bigger.
Yeah, so let's go over to the Ben Thompson analysis and see what he has to say and his analysis, because there's some good stuff. There's some green shoots, but there's obviously some economic issues that Brian will have to work through if he really wants to pull this off. So Ben Thompson is reviewing the overview of what Chesky is pitching and says, it's a beautiful vision that unsurprisingly is a lot like Airbnb itself. The problem is that I'm not sure that it's a complement. While Chesky romanticizes Airbnb's founding story and the idea of making friends with strangers anywhere in the world, the reality of Airbnb is often much different. Professionalized hosts you never see giving you codes to nondescript condos or houses with endless rules and fees, all governed by fake courtesy and the fear of a bad review. More broadly, setting up Airbnb as a counter to everything that has allegedly gone wrong with tech is an interesting choice when Airbnb is arguably more emblematic of tech's recent impact than any other company. On one hand, Airbnb has created new markets that didn't exist previously, transforming real estate from static assets to much more dynamic ones, and providing a dizzying array of new choices to travelers. On the other hand, the cost of the former has been the transformation of residential neighborhoods into awkward hotel districts, and the latter has entailed creating a massive market and making everything into a transaction. Those marketplace dynamics govern everything. Airbnb hosts have a fixed asset that needs to maximize utilization to earn money. That means that they are beholden to a service that brings huge amounts of demand consistently, minimizing the number of vacant nights. Travelers, for their part, want something other than a hotel for whatever reason. Families with kids, for example, but still want a mechanism to establish trust. Airbnb succeeds by bringing these parties together at scale. Or to put it another way, the route to connecting real people with real assets necessarily first entails atomizing both sides of the market such that only Airbnb can bring them together. Sure, real people in real houses is different than looking at a screen, but it's arguably less enduring and meaningful precisely because of how impersonal and fleeting the transaction is. And so the dynamics of Airbnb, this is kind of the key question is, can Airbnb move into other services? And there's a big question about disintermediation here. And so the interesting thing here, Jordy.
The disintermediation issue I don't think is that significant.
Really?
And the reason for this is that experiences, at least in a travel setting, are the kind of things, how many times a year are you going to get, go rafting in Mexico, right? You're going to go once, call it every few years when you go to vacation in Mexico, right? You're not like building some intense relationship with the service provider so that you're going to say at some point, hey, I know we're both paying a bunch of fees. Why don't we go around? The difference is one of the services that they're offering through the new app is massages, right?
Personal training.
Personal
Dog
training.
walking.
These are things where you see this person on a frequent basis. You develop some type of friendship, and ultimately there's going to be a conversation at some point where the service provider says
15%.
And that's why a lot of the marketplaces that have operated in these spaces like dog walking are much closer to lead generation services, in that the company, the platform over time really struggles to retain its top customers and top talent or top providers.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. I mean, I think the good take is this idea of like Airbnb 1.0 was let's disaggregate Craigslist into a bunch of different software companies. But now Airbnb is saying like, let's reaggregate it. And there are a lot of long tail services that are just one-off things. Like you only get your house painted every once in a while. You only need, a specific type of gardener to go look for a specific plant every once in a while. There's specific thing. Tree trimming might not be something where you have someone on a monthly retainer and you can have that relationship. But for something like dog walking, it's going to be every day or every week. Pretty quickly, there's going to be risk there. And so, Ben Thompson continues saying, consider experiences, which Airbnb already tried to get off the ground 8 years ago. I didn't realize it was so long ago, but it made sense as like a compliment. You're, on a trip with a bunch of friends and you want to add river rafting in Mexico, which I think was what your example was, which I don't even know if there's that much river rafting in Mexico, but
I'm sure there is, John.
somewhere.
You want to bet?
Yeah,
if I'm right, you have to go river rafting in Mexico tonight.
Yeah, tonight. In the presentation, Chesky derides traditional tourist traps like sightseeing buses or famous landmarks and promises that bespoke tours or classes from locals will be much more meaningful. The problem is that bespoke means marginal costs, which are only manageable with very high prices. Very high prices, however, mean much lower demand. Thus, what you actually end up getting are cookie cutter experiences that can be delivered with relatively low marginal costs, which are exactly the experiences Chesky derides. Notice that this is in fact exactly what happened with the traditional Airbnb rental. While there are incredible houses that you can rent for very high prices, the bog standard Airbnb experience is depersonalized and automated to the greatest extent possible. At the same time, it is precisely because real estate is a fixed cost that hosts are motivated to make it all work. Experienced providers, on the other hand, don't have fixed costs and thus lack the necessary motivation to make scaled experiences work.
The other
thing
here
costs,
that
like sightseeing buses.
I think is interesting to note, the reason that Airbnb, or one reason it's been so successful, is you can have a bunch of random strangers staying in a property that you own all year long, and the property will generally still appreciate, right? There's going to be wear and tear on the house. The reason that Turo and other platforms haven't had the same potential scale, right? They're big companies, is because you're taking an asset as if you're on the asset side, and that's a depreciating asset. You're letting 100 strangers drive your car for a year. That asset is going to drop tremendously in value, and so can you kind of recapture that through revenue? Yes, but it oftentimes isn't as good of a trade as just having somebody stay in an old home or vacation home that you're only using a few times a year.
Yeah, I think like 90% of the Turo economy is built on podcasters filming stunt vibe reels and marketing stunts, basically. And fake Instagram course.
Yeah, the gurus.
The guru market is massive.
The guru. I wonder what percentage.
I actually think Turo's doing pretty well, and I think the tour experience for me. I flew to New Mexico for a birthday party, and there was a F-150 waiting for me in the parking lot. It was great. It was much easier than going to the rental car counter and getting some subcompact or something like that. Let's see. From the Wired profile that we were covering earlier, Chesky explains that historically people used Airbnb only once or twice a year, so its design had to be exceptionally simple. Now the company is retooling for more frequent access. Open the app and you see a trio of icons that act as gateways to the expanded functions eventually. Chesky says Airbnb will offer hundreds of services, perhaps as far-ranging as plumbing, cleaning, car repair, guitar lessons, and tutoring, then take its 15% fee. So, I mean, even if that does work out as lead gen, there's probably a business there. The question is just, is that the business that produces an incremental $85 billion in market cap, right? Like, could they build
double the company
front end to plumbing, cleaning, repair, kind of an Angie's List style business? I don't know what Angie's List trades for. Could they take that market? Maybe, but is that an incremental $5 billion in market cap, $10 billion in market cap? Who knows?
It's interesting. I mean, Thumbtack is another comp here.
Yeah.
They'd be entering that space. Thumbtack is private. Last round was done at $3.2 billion.
Yeah.
And
Great
so it's
company,
hard
but
to say.
hard to move the needle at an $85 billion market cap for Airbnb. The fact that end users only use Airbnb once or twice a year is precisely what makes the entire service work. Again, Airbnb matches up hosts who need their properties occupied as often as possible with travelers who only need a property once or twice a year. Solving that mismatch is the foundation of the entire business, and it's well worth Airbnb's fee. The need fundamentally changes when it comes to day-to-day life in your hometown. Yes, users need help in finding service providers, and yes, service providers need help in finding customers, but the goal for both, however, is to establish long-term relationships. Once you have a hairdresser, you want to visit the same hairdresser repeatedly, not find a new one every time. And by extension, neither you nor the hairdresser has any interest in including Airbnb in every transaction forevermore. In other words, what Airbnb is proposing may end up being valuable, but it will be very hard for Airbnb to capture that value in a meaningful way. So yeah, maybe there's a lead gen component, and then it does drop to more of a payment processor, because at 5% transaction fee, you might stay on the Airbnb platform because of the reputation and building up your profile there. But you're probably going to be closer to credit card processing fees than the current Airbnb fee. Again, contrast
the challenge here is there are so many vertical SaaS or SaaS plus marketplace businesses for all of these subcategories, right? So Airbnb is competing with companies that are heavily funded that can afford to build really specialized tools for the service providers, right? So there's vertical SaaS if you're running a barbershop. And like, I think that there's $1 billion company in that space, right? I don't know if that market could support a $10 billion company, but it can support a $1 billion company that that barbers really love and want to be on, right? So again,
Ben Thompson goes over to Paul Graham talking about founder mode. The theme of Brian's talk was that the conventional wisdom about how to run larger companies is mistaken. As Airbnb grew, well-meaning people advised him that he had to run the company in a certain way for it to scale. Their advice could optimistically be summarized as hire good people and give them room to do their jobs. He followed this advice and the results were disastrous. So he had to figure out a better way on his own, which he did by studying how Steve Jobs ran Apple. You identified that correctly. So far, it seems to be working. Airbnb's free cash flow margin is now among the best in Silicon Valley. And so Ben Thompson says, I think there is a lot of truth to the idea that the most innovative companies are best understood as mechanisms to manifest a founder's vision, and that founders can err by giving up too much control and not getting deep into every aspect of the company. You certainly get a sense for Chesky's desire to control every aspect of the product, both in his presentation in that Wired profile and in another profile in the Wall Street Journal where Chesky explicitly invokes Jobs.
Yeah, so he says, when I asked him for names that personify founder mode, the first he mentioned were Steve Jobs and Walt Disney. I don't want to ever put myself on the same level, he said. I'm more like a disciple. I'm more like a painter who studies Michelangelo. I'm not ever saying I'm going to be Michelangelo, but
Smart.
I believe in that school of thought.
Yeah.
Smart.
That's great.
He goes on to say that he admires Jobs and Disney as creatives who sat at the intersection of art and technology.
No way. That's the meme.
That's the meme.
It's a huge meme. Right
that's the meme.
Shout out
listened.
Creatine Cycle.
We, in many ways, create this show at the intersection of art and technology. Yes. And that he doesn't identify as an entrepreneur or a business person. I think of myself as a designer. He says, I'm a designer who has been afforded one of the biggest canvases in the world.
Yeah. To that
Beautiful
end,
line.
Chesky spent a lot of time focused on app details like the icons and the animation, and everything looks great. The problem, however, is that Jobs was creating products and Disney was creating experiences. In both cases, the attention to detail was critical to how many people wanted to buy iPhones or visit Disney World. Chesky, on the other hand, has created a marketplace, and the success or failure of marketplaces is not governed by the details of icons or the layouts of apps, but rather by how much more blunt instruments like incentive structures and take rates. It's very, very interesting. There was one criticism of the
Spicy from Ben. Little spice.
Little spice,
Sprinkle
yeah.
in a little spice.
Yeah. There was some, I saw some like kind of negative feedback on X to the Airbnb launch. They were quote tweeting the video and they were saying that like, they should have used more B-roll and made this more human. Instead, they're showing us a lot of UI. And I just think about the Airbnb UI as being like fees and charts and
the beauty of
ratings and
Airbnb
stuff.
is that in a simple way, you can get access to incredible spaces and
Yes.
experiences,
Yeah.
right?
And that's what's
And
expensive.
you don't want to be thinking every time I'm in the Airbnb app,
it's money, it's cost, it's headache. I'm
annoyed,
there because there's a problem, right? And so
Like,
that they actually need to minimize that
I'm
and
messaging
focus on the
the
actual
host
experience,
and
for
saying,
sure.
this
What's the
doesn't
Wi-Fi?
look anything like what the pictures, the pictures you had, which has created obviously an opportunity for Wander.
So sponsor of the show, by the way. So Ben closes it out by saying, these are the dynamics that undergird my skepticism of Airbnb's new offerings. The impression I get from the presentation and profiles is that Chesky seems to think that the first version of Experiences failed because the app wasn't good enough. I think it failed because the economics don't work. There was, of course, similar skepticism about Airbnb's core offering from the beginning. It's one thing to look backwards and describe the arbitrage opportunity that was available in short-term rentals, and another to have understood that opportunity when Chesky rented out that first airbed in 2007. What a fantastic story. Moreover, one way to think about the impact of AI is that it will create the conditions for massive market expansion in real-world experiences and services that can't be done by computers. It's plausible that Airbnb can leverage its huge user base, which is massive, 2 billion, remember, into riding a wave that may now be forming. So that's kind of the bull case that he's laying out there.
Everybody becomes post-economic after ASI,
but
everybody just does Airbnb experiences.
Still need a hairdresser
all day long.
and a personal trainer, maybe, or
No,
just
I think
somebody to hang out with.
I think in many ways,
rafting.
Airbnb is safe from some amount of disruption to the core business, which is a hyper-scaled, vacation rental platform. But at the same time, it's hard to undersee where, once they're at 2 billion users, right? Where's the growth going to come from?
That's tough.
Especially when you have, new providers like Wander, which are coming in and potentially, and we're seeing this already, just eating away at some of the highest value users.
Yeah.
Right?
And also, I mean, just for a comp, Hilton Hotels is a $60 billion company. So it's like, even if they were
Marriott
able to go,
is like 77 billion.
Okay. Yeah. Marriott. Yeah. So even, 75 today, 74 today. So even if they were to go build like a whole hotel chain and enter that market, like, again, that's still not a 10X. That's still not putting them in like the $1 trillion conversation of like hyperscale, which is like probably where you want to go.
He wants to be
eventually.
in that conversation.
I think so. That separates the Michelangelos from merely the disciples. But I mean, it's been a fantastic run. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is an interesting
story.
dynamic. Do you want to own Marriott at 77 billion with a
Airbnb?
CEO who I can't name?
I agree. Founder
versus Airbnb at just
go with
slightly above
Chesky.
it.
He's going to try something. He's going to try a couple things. He's going to be doing a different release in a year, and maybe there's an entirely new idea.
I think if he did the Chesky method, a bodybuilding course, he could probably add 100 million to the bottom line.
100%.
Through that. Just pure, even better margins than software.
He's still looking
marketplace
extremely
revenue.
strong.
Yeah.
There's like those old photos of him as a bodybuilder, but he's still looking jacked.
Yeah.
It's great.
Still got it.
Anyway,
Still got it.
At the same time, so Ben Thompson closes with, at the same time, I can't help but wonder if many of the frustrations that Chesky chalked up to manager mode, are in fact for him personally downstream from building a service where one can only guide the outcomes you want, not dictate them. The fact that the romantic story he tells about what Airbnb symbolizes doesn't seem to match up with the reality of what Airbnb is may itself be an analogy for Chesky's desire for control in arenas where he has very little. Interesting. So yeah, I mean, you're building a marketplace. There's only so much control you have, as opposed to building a product where you can say, I'm going to go build a virtual reality headset now or an Apple Watch, and it's going to look like this, and I'm going to, mold the screen and make all these products.
Yeah, if he really just wanted to do product design, what's the classic, founder has an exit and then builds an app that allows you to meet friends in your area.
Yeah.
And they're like, I just want to build an app to meet friends. And then you're just like, no, you're building a dating app. Like, that's who's going to use this.
Understanding like the base reality of human interaction.
I have like
and economic forces.
multiple buddies who had great exits and then built like that app and then eventually realized what they were building and had to.
It's the same thing with
pivot away.
the personal CRM. I want a personal CRM. It's like, no, you just want a CRM. Like, if you're thinking about your personal relationships in that transactional of a way, you should just think of it as business associates that you're pitching and just use an actual
Salesforce.
Just use a real CRM.
Yeah.
Anyway, some news in the chip world. The U.S. has scrapped the AI diffusion rule in a revamp of Biden-era chip curbs. This was tearing up the internet. We were trying to get Dylan Patel on a little bit earlier. He's booked in a week or two. He's traveling a lot. We'll get him on to break it down. There's a few other people. Jordan Schneider over at China Talk is on vacation. It's a disaster. So there aren't as many people to comment on this as I was hoping, but fortunately the Wall Street Journal has a write-up. And so Microsoft and Oracle have spoken out against the rule. Again, the the AI diffusion rule. The U.S. Department of Commerce said that it's rescinding the diffusion rule on the grounds that it would have stifled American innovation, saddled companies with onerous regulations, and undermined diplomatic relations with dozens of countries. NVIDIA said that it welcomed the Trump administration's leadership and new direction in AI policy. With the diffusion rule revoked, America will have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to lead the next industrial revolution and create high-paying U.S. jobs, build new U.S. supplied infrastructure, and alleviate the trade deficit, a company spokesperson told the Wall Street Journal.
Tech companies, including Microsoft and Oracle, had spoken out against the rule, which imposed caps on how many chips countries such as India and Switzerland can buy, saying the move would limit U.S. firms' opportunities abroad without doing much to hamper China, the main target of the tightened controls. It was a little wild that we were limiting places like India and Switzerland, which we have strong relationships with.
This all started with like the Singapore loophole and the chips going to Malaysia. And it really seems like, this is the sledgehammer versus the scalpel, right? Everyone's okay with the scalpel. People don't like sledgehammers. Yeah.
So Jeffrey Kessler, who's the U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Industry and Security, says the Trump administration will pursue a bold, inclusive strategy to American AI technology with trusted foreign countries around the world while keeping the technology out of the hands of our adversaries. So anyways.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
this is what
Jensen
we were talking about
is over in, we got to pull this video up.
Oh yeah.
They made,
we're talking about this with Aaron Ginn about how it's nice to think that, if we don't sell NVIDIA chips to, what was the country that you, India or Switzerland? Like, America will just have control and they'll have to use OpenAI and ChatGPT remotely via API. And it's like, no, actually they will just buy Huawei Ascend chips and run DeepSeek and Manus on top of it. They're going to want to run their own hardware. They want their AI super factories.
Isn't it funny how the name Manus?
Manus is a wild name.
It makes you sound like you're from
Texas. So Texas. Manus. Anyway, let's pull up the video if we have a second.
We don't run Manus on our
We don't take
GPUs.
kindly to Manus in these parts.
We don't take kindly to Manus.
We only like llama.
So
what's going on
Jensen has been in the UAE,
Okay.
I think Abu Dhabi,
Yep.
and they built what looks to be
Oh, it's elevating. This is awesome.
That's not a
Is this
hologram,
screen?
is it?
This looks like a hologram. Either way, it's awesome. Such
What a
showmanship.
squad too.
Insane showmanship.
Wow.
Anyway,
Another 100 billion to Jensen.
to
And he is, we got to pull this up.
he's been on an absolute tear. So the announcement also took aim at Chinese tech giant Huawei, stating that using Huawei Ascend chips anywhere in the world violates U.S. export controls, of course, because Huawei Ascend chips are potentially built on top of American-owned IP in the lithography stack and therefore can be subject to U.S. export controls. The Bureau of Industry and Security, a Commerce Department agency, said it will warn the public about potential consequences of allowing American chips to be used for Chinese AI models. Rick Su noted that the Chinese company's advanced AI chips are only sold locally and that demand for them far outweighs supply. So Huawei should be able to continue doing business there with or without any changes in the export controls. Of course, China has immense demand for large GPU clusters. They want to train the next version of DeepSeek. They think that DeepSeek is probably going to move entirely to the next training run to Huawei Ascend chips. And although the Huawei Ascend rack-mounted unit is not directly competitive with, it is directly competitive, but it's not at power dollar parity with NVIDIA's DGX. Yeah, on efficiency. It can train the models. It's just more expensive, but China has a lot of cheap power and is willing to invest. And so, it might cost 30% more to train a massive model, but we're not talking about orders of magnitude, and everything in AI is defined by orders of magnitude. Yeah. Anyway, do you have another video?
I have another screenshot to pull up, which is just a funny chart to look at because you can see the exact moment that Jensen really started cooking.
Yeah. Oh, there we go.
So this is the largest company end of May, which we've been tracking.
It's neck and neck.
And Microsoft was at it's hard for me to see, but I think about 80%.
Yep. And this is just for the end of May. So we're halfway through May. Everyone's
last Monday, Microsoft was sitting at over 80%. And then Jensen said, 1 second. So right now,
Jevons paradox, undefeated. There will never be enough venture capital.
Yeah,
There will
you
never
said
be
they're going to
enough
study.
GPUs.
They're going to put Jevons paradox into
Preschools
preschool
for
curriculum.
sure after this.
Really getting people to
People
understand.
were so bearish on NVIDIA.
It's
and
like
look at what happened.
The more dinosaur toys you get, as toys get cheaper,
You
you're
want
going to
more.
want more.
You
you're
will.
Gonna, and you're going to buy more.
That's true.
Which
it
is true.
violates traditional laws of supply and demand. But
But yeah, so
overall
right
market will
now,
grow.
NVIDIA is sitting at $3.3 trillion market cap. Tiger actually just rotated out of ARM.
Oh, yeah.
And they rotated out completely
Okay.
and increased their position in NVIDIA.
Let's
so
go.
when
Let's hear it
Tiger's
for
long,
Tiger.
sometimes they get it
I
very
think we
right.
need a soundboard cue for Tiger. There we go.
There we go.
Fantastic. The change is a big win for countries previously limited from buying chips, notably Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Singapore, Israel. Morningstar said it is also set to benefit U.S. AI players like NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel, of course, because they'll be able to sell to more countries, and we're already seeing that happen. For China chip makers and AI companies, the changes are likely to have only a limited impact since they are already banned from accessing U.S. tech and equipment. The news comes as President Trump tours the Middle East, and a number of U.S. tech companies announced AI deals in the region.
Only Intel could be down 30% in the last year during an AI super cycle.
So brutal.
It's so brutal.
Bet on the CPU, folks, instead of the GPU.
Pick the wrong horse.
Generational miss.
Wrong
David
horse.
Sachs is quoted
The
in
right
here.
race, the wrong horse.
Right race, wrong horse. David Sachs says the diffusion rule literally restricted the diffusion or proliferation of American technology all over the world. David Sachs, Trump's AI and crypto czar, said at the U.S. Saudi Investment Forum, adding that there is no risk with a friend like Saudi Arabia. They're just friends. The original reason for this diffusion rule is that we have a policy of not wanting our advanced semiconductors to go to what are known as countries of concern. But that's not as big of a problem now, especially when it's a global competition. Anyway, we should move on to Apple. They're getting in the Neuralink game. They're competing with Elon, going head to head, literally. Putting chips in your head.
So they're working with a startup, Synchron, on a new brain-computer interfaces
I'd never heard of this company
to
before.
assist people with disabilities.
Yeah.
And we'll just start going through here. So Apple is embracing the world of brain-computer interfaces, unveiling a new technology that one day could revolutionize how humans interact with their devices. The company is taking early steps to enable people to control their iPhones with neural signals captured by a new generation of brain implants.
It's going to be huge for people that use AirPods instead of wired headphones.
I was joking earlier. There's this company Believe that's going viral on X.
I haven't seen this.
For Luke Metro was doing this,
Okay.
right? He basically tagging the account.
Oh, this is the crypto thing?
and it all he had to do was just make a single post. It created a meme coin.
Okay. Yes,
that he's generating.
Yeah, walk me through this future. This is really white mirror stuff.
And so there's a world in the future where somebody could just think, and a meme coin would be generated based on a thought.
Yeah.
And that would just be very American.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the gambling apps are using haptic feedback to vibrate the phone when you win. Turn the flashlight on and off, really flash colors and sound all over to stimulate you while you're gambling. Imagine if they could stimulate your neurons directly.
Yeah.
Retention would go through the roof.
I want haptics in my brain.
Haptics in your brain, just massaging your neurons, just releasing dopamine directly. As soon as you open the mobile game app, the Pick 3, or the Match 3, isn't that what they call it? Match 3. Brutal.
So dark.
I mean, the bull case here is, of course, that like Neuralink right now is an incredible technology for people who are paraplegic, right?
Totally.
So the
And I think
earliest
it's
adopters
smart for
are
these
people
companies
who
to
are
focus on that.
totally,
use
because that's
case.
just such a more optimistic scenario. And then over time allow people to bring things in. I mean, they're talking about curing blindness, curing deafness. There's so many amazing potential uses of this technology. Like any technology, can go good or bad. It's up to us how we use it. And so
So the interesting thing here is that Apple seems to be letting other companies do the hardcore R&D and go through the FDA process to actually get approval for these devices.
But they've been doing that more because AirPods are now approved as a hearing aid, because they have the same technology that enables noise canceling, which is basically there's a microphone that's pointed outwards, and then they play the opposite of that sound inwards. Are you familiar with how noise canceling works? So you're hearing both the outside world and then the opposite of the outside world. And so that creates the noise cancellation. That can also be used to amplify the outside world. And that's what happens when you have transparency mode on. But if you take transparency mode, which records the outside of the world and then plays it back over the speaker, if you take that to its kind of logical extreme, all of a sudden you have something that can amplify something that, like just anything you're hearing, to the point of actually helping someone who's hard of hearing, which is very, very cool. So historically, humans have interacted with their computers mechanically using mice and keyboards. Smartphones
Let's give it up
touch,
for the humans.
the keyboard. Oh, I was going to give it up for the keyboards and mice.
And the keyboards too.
And
they don't
the
get enough
peripherals.
credit.
Peripherals are underrated for
Totally.
sure. Smartphones introduce touch, a behavioral input, but still an observable physical movement. A new capability means Apple devices won't need to see the user make specific movements. The devices can detect user intentions from decoded brain signals. Apple has worked on the new standard with Synchron, which makes a stent-like device that is implanted in a vein atop the brain's motor cortex. So I think this is less invasive than what Neuralink does. Neuralink, they actually have to drill a hole in your skull roughly the size of a quarter, and then the device fills in that hole.
Just a quarter.
Fills in that hole that's left from the skull that's gone. And then the electrodes are placed inside the brain, and then they place the skin flap back over, and it charges wirelessly, which is a pretty crazy implementation. They needed to invent a robot just to do the surgery because it's so precise, and no human hand can place the electrodes or the neurons appropriately. But this, I think, would be less invasive because it just goes into a vein, and so it's as easy as taking some blood, basically.
Yep. And the tinfoil hat enjoyers will appreciate that Synchron, DARPA was in the Series A. So
that's going to go over great on X.
Yeah,
I'm sure
they're
people
going to
are
love
going
that.
to be really,
Alex
really
Jones
happy about that.
will be all over this.
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
the founder of
No,
Hollow,
not the founder of Hollow.
who's also named Alex Jones.
Yes, the founder of InfoWars.
Yeah,
Alex Jones.
he's going to love that DARPA is funding, brain-computer interfaces in partnership with Apple.
He's going to be front of the
all
line.
over that.
Front
yeah.
of the line. Yeah.
Yep.
Famously loves technology, that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we have Delian Asparouhov from Founders Fund and Varda coming in the studio next. Varda just released their they just brought back the third capsule. So
3
we
for
gotta
3.
Celebrate that. 3 for 3. They said on X, is this boring yet? Are you getting sick of us? Until Delian comes in, we'll do some ad reads. We'll talk about public investing for those who take it seriously. They got multi-asset investing, industry-leading yields. They're trusted by millions, folks. Get
Right,
on
and their new
public.com.
feature-generated assets is just wild.
Very cool.
You got to go around and play around with it. It's just generatedAssets.com.
Oh, cool. It's a separate domain.
We are going to take 10 different, basically you can create indexes with chat.
Yep.
And then you can back test them so you can see how they performed against the market more broadly. So tomorrow I'm going to get like 10 or so different screenshots of different indexes that are interesting, but it's interesting. You can look at, for example, since we had Andreessen on yesterday, you can look at A16Z alumni companies, how they've performed in the public markets, and the results are astonishing. It actually makes me even more bullish on these sort of founder-led public companies. So excited to get into that.
Well, as we wait for Delian, let's talk about Linear. Linear is a purpose-built tool for planning and building products, meet the system for modern software development, streamline issues, projects, and product roadmaps. Go to Linear.
And when they say the standard, they're not joking. It actually, I think, I don't know how much of these figures are public, but if there's a tech company that you love in the private markets or in the public markets, they're probably already using Linear. So go check them out.
Okay, I'm texting Delian, and we got him in the studio. Welcome to the show. How you doing, Delian?
Hey, sorry, I promise. I'm normally right on the dot this time.
Oh, you're all good. Welcome. to the
What's
show. We got
up?
some breaking
3 for
news.
3. 3
Breaking
for
news.
3.
Announcing it here exclusively on TBPN. Tell us what happened with the capsule. No one knows, so you're hearing it here first.
At 6:13 p.m. PST on Wednesday, early evening, we executed a deorbit burn, which happened sort of on the opposite side, roughly, of the globe from Australia. and we came in ripping through the atmosphere, 17,000 miles an hour. Capsule has sort of GPS all throughout, so we're tracking it. I actually got a good photo of me, my co-founder and our CTO, and me holding a little baby, watching that GPS track, sort of coming in. It's sometimes a little anticlimactic because unlike a rocket launch where you can kind of do the live stream, you watch it from the ground, move up. A reentry capsule is like moving very, very fast, kind of hard to track, kind of hard to do a live stream. And literally the way that we call things out is just like it's got this GPS thing, and we know that the parachutes have opened successfully only when we just see that the GPS like vertical slows down.
This is super bullish for the conspiracy theorists. They're like, oh, there's no live stream. Did it even go to space? Who knows? Maybe he's making it up.
I just think you're
throwing
doing
it out
you're
of a
doing
truck.
a
out into the desert,
you need to create some type of way for Americans to bet on reentry.
Ooh, yeah.
It's just un-American. I mean, I know you're bringing it down in Australia, but it's frankly un-American that you're not letting us all, place our bets. But
Anyway, congratulations.
Was pushing me on, you should figure out how to make more gambling in aerospace. And I was like, look, man, the easiest way is just like gamble on, sort of mission outcomes. And so this is how we know we're not at peak gambling yet, is there's not enough gambling on all these hyper specific technical outcomes. People will gamble on like, will Starship land? But I want it like down to like the individual, sort of like, meter of just like, is it going to take 5 seconds to land, 6 seconds to land? Like, is it going to come into this T trajectory?
Well,
we live in a hardware-rich world.
Yeah, well, speaking of betting and instead of P Doom, what's your P Dome? I want your take on the Golden Dome. What's the probability that America gets a Golden Dome in the next few years? And we do have missile defense, right? Like missile defense is a thing. We're not domeless right now, but like we're talking about just improving what we have, right? We're not flying blind here, hopefully.
Yeah, let me give the sort of bull versus bear case.
Sure.
All this stuff is sort of somewhat predicated on obviously what Israel has been able to show, and especially over the past sort of couple years, especially countering some of the Iranian attacks that have happened. If you were to like take the Israeli system and then extrapolate it to like the scale of the United States, it just doesn't really work, right? They're a really small geography, very dense. It is actually possible to set up basically like, missile defense batteries across their entire border.
Yeah.
If you were to do that across like the entire United States, sort of border around the continental US, and you extrapolate the cost of it, it's something on the order of like a $10 trillion program.
Wow. And we're not fighting with Canada or Mexico or like even smaller like states. Like these are low flying projectiles. They're just wildly different, right?
Yeah, the threat vectors are also totally different. You're looking at like Russia, North Korea, Iran, etc. And so that solution set sort of looks very different. And so that's the premise of Golden Dome, and it's the first time that they've opened the Overton window on considering things that aren't just like ground, air, or sea based. For the first time in the Golden Dome language, they talk about a lot of sort of space-based applications, in particular space-based intercept. So the idea there is like if Russia or North Korea basically launches a missile towards the United States, right now we do have, like you said, we're not domeless. We do have some systems. They're basically scattered from like Guam to Hawaii to Alaska, etc. Basically like all of our furthest out areas, and for sure along the sort of border as well, but furthest out areas that are closer to those adversaries to take them out. Before they get anywhere close to the United States. The idea is now you can just have a constellation of satellites that are orbiting above North Korea, Russia, et cetera, regularly. So you can take this stuff out before it even gets up into like the upper end of its sort of trajectory. Now, that type of system is also not trivially sort of cheap. So here's my bull versus bear case. You're asking, is it sort of going to happen? We proposed a system like this in the early 1980s, right? In
Star Wars, right?
Yeah, Star Wars days, the Space Development Initiative, I think it was called, or Space Defense Initiative.
SDI.
They ran some early trade studies that had a lot of enthusiasm in Congress, et cetera, and then ultimately it fell apart, partially because the like scale of the economics of it relative to the sort of benefits of the defense sort of the nation just didn't really entirely pencil out. And so the sort of bear case for sort of Golden Dome would be, maybe we end up in that same world where we like start to run these analyses, we do these things, and then all we do is really just like buy a couple of traditional terrestrial, basically missile, defense battery systems that already exist, and we make those sensors a little better. Like the current, one is this thing called, sort of THAAD is basically like the largest, sort of system. it actually doesn't have a particularly high hit rate of being able to take out the missiles on the way in. And so, right now, I think we have like 40 THAAD missiles, and I think they have like something like a 25%, sort of hit rate. So it's like we can take out like 10 ICBMs. Russia has like 1,000. And so, we're like a little off on order of magnitude. So maybe it's like make that one a little more accurate, et cetera. So that's sort of like, I would say the like, maybe not default case, but that is like the downside case of like, we announce this stuff, we talk about it. When it comes down to like the economics and actually implementing this, it becomes too tricky. Congress flips from, sort of Republican to Democrat, in the next election cycle. They don't want to give, sort of President Trump a win. And so they decide to shut it down. The bull case is, okay, well, relative to the 1980s, there's a lot of people that can actually do pretty near-term demonstrations of this, right? Obviously orbital rockets this year are launching and landing every single day. There's a lot of companies that, are looking to pitch in on this that aren't just people that are going to throw out white papers, but are actually like very hardware rich, right? There may be a lot of over enthusiasm in the defense tech, funding space and ecosystem. But like, look, we were talking about this earlier this week. Like, look at what Venus Aerospace, sort of just demonstrated, right? Like, while there is maybe over enthusiasm and lots of funding, at least people are translating into like real hardware demonstrations of like next generation technologies. And so, if there's a set of companies that before Congress flips is actually able to go and do some real world demonstrations, show that this is practical capability, get some defense funding, sort of flowing into actually operationalizing those initiatives, so that by the time it flips, there's already something that's sort of pseudo operational or very close. Now it becomes a little harder to justify. It's like, yeah, there's some political win if you're a Democrat to not give, Trump a win. But like, the defense budget has always been sort of very bipartisan as well. So that's my sort of like bull versus, sort of bear. It's like, the first time in history we can probably demonstrate this really quickly, and we've got a 2-year window, and it's a sort of national priority. Bear is, it's pretty easy for us to just sort of flip back to just doing what we have always done.
You mentioned Venus Space. They put up a post yesterday. They said, today, Venus Aerospace made history. We completed the first ever U.S. flight of a rotating detonation rocket engine, proving runway-based high-speed flight is possible. I don't really understand what rotating detonation rocket engine is. Do you understand the applications of this? Is this defense tech or space tech? Is it commercial? Is this DoD program? Like, what is the story here with Venus?
It's been a minute since so I met up with the Venus team, but the last time that I chatted with them, the intention of what they were building was to create these, sort of space planes that would basically take off from a runway, get out of the atmosphere, cross across the globe, and go land back on a runway. And so that was sort of the, sort of commercial case. It'd obviously be, sort of very expensive on a per seat, sort of basis, but there's obviously, sort of plenty of people in the world that would pay significant in order to be able to like, get from LA to Tokyo, but do that in like, in theory, you could do that in under an hour, basically. Like if you think about how quickly it takes you to orbit between those two, it's roughly 45 minutes.
Yeah, this is like SpaceX point to point.
Yeah, exactly. But using sort of traditional runways rather than having to build out all the like SpaceX basically like landing infrastructure, like their planes can actually take off and land on sort of normal runways.
Yeah.
And so their engine definitely demonstration is obviously the very key first step of being able to. And then apologies at home today. So
Hey,
welcome to the stream.
We should just spend the next few minutes just turn this into a kid show.
Yeah.
At least one of our kids are probably watching at home.
Let's break it down. Batman or Superman?
Dinosaurs.
Dinosaurs. T-Rex or Velociraptor?
Fire trucks.
Fire trucks.
Fire trucks. I like it.
Yeah.
What about rockets though? Rockets versus space planes.
Ooh.
Rockets.
I think we got to go to our child correspondent. Is it rockets or airplanes?
Rockets or space planes? I think enthusiastic about both.
Oh my gosh! I can't wait till he's co-hosting the show with our children.
Yeah, we could only get
30
Delian
years
for
from
15 minutes today. It'd be so much easier if you could just delegate this whole call-in thing to your son. It'd be fantastic.
He'd be a much more entertaining guest. Okay, yeah. I know we didn't quite make it to the top of the hour, but maybe I'll go take care of this bad boy.
No, this was great. It's great having both you guys on.
Quick Delta V today.
Yeah, we'll talk to you
Cheers.
soon.
Talk soon.
Have
fun, guys.
Bye.
See, that is pronatalism in
work,
action, in reality. He's not just threading about it.
It's great. Well, let's tell you about numeralhq.com. Sales tax on autopilot. Spend less than 5 minutes per month on sales tax compliance. Go to numeralhq.com. My company's on it. Jordy's company's on it. Lots of companies are on it. Benchmark Series A.
Benchmark Series A. Thank you to Numeral.
And let's also tell you about Vanta. Automate compliance, manage risk, improve trust continuously. Vanta's trust management platform takes the manual work out of your security and compliance process and replaces it with continuous automation, whether you're pursuing your first framework or managing a complex program. Anyway, let's do some timeline, and then we will bring in our next guest. NVIDIA, we talked about
Covered this already. This next post is great from Bryce.
Let's do it.
That SBF built one of the most legendary private investment portfolios of all time tells you more about the business of venture than 1,000 podcasts on the subject ever will. Well, what about this podcast, Bryce? Because we're saying what you're saying. He did make some good bets. And nobody can take that away from Cursor.
Cursor and Anthropic very, very early.
Even though David Tisch, friend of the show, was also in the original Cursor round.
And said that he didn't
and
get
he said it wasn't
right
like
price.
$200K to $500 million, which was the number circulating around. He said there's no way that would math out.
Can you imagine if SBF is like secretly got like co-founder shares or something, or like got like an incubation type deal? So he did get that massive stake at 200K.
Who knows?
I don't know. But now someone else owns it. Financial investor.
Yeah, somebody was able to buy out that Cursor position, and I wouldn't be surprised if we had him on the show at one point.
Maybe.
Or a future guest.
Maybe. They might have been in the audience. They might be listening right now.
They're probably listening right now.
From their yacht in the Amalfi Coast.
Just off that one bet.
Basically. I mean, it's enough, right?
Crazy.
Anyway, we already covered the
we should
Airbnb
cover the
news.
Brian
Brian Armstrong
news. So
what happened
Coinbase, basically cyber criminals bribed and recruited rogue overseas support agents to pull personal data on 1% of Coinbase's MTUs. No password, private keys, or funds were exposed. Prime accounts were untouched. And Coinbase has committed to reimbursing users that were
impacted.
Basically, you had to be impacted by a social engineering attack. So people weren't getting support agents to move funds around. Funds weren't stolen like that, but it would be, let's say somebody gets your personal information, you get a random call and they say, hey,
we were talking about this, how the spam around Coinbase was getting crazy, right? You'd get spam text saying like, click here to log in or something.
No, it's truly,
I mean, it
felt like it 100x like 2 months ago or something like that.
It's a great business for these scammers, right? Like the scammers it's just whatever money they make is pure profit.
Yeah. I wonder how much of those social engineering phone calls now are happening with AI.
I don't know.
It has to be a good percentage.
I mean, because the spam calls I would get when I pick up were ridiculous. Just recordings with like music on them, and it just didn't sound anything like an actual call that you'd get ever.
Yeah, and the concern here is that this data is floating around now, and people can find out where big crypto holders live and find out what they look like. There's ID information, as part of this, and so it's a huge risk. If somebody was on Coinbase and they had, 10 Bitcoin, now somebody could go to their house and say, "I would like those 10 Bitcoin."
Yep, transfer them to me. Very risky.
So it's
seems
super
like
unfortunate,
Brian
but
did
the
the right
response
thing and
is
responded very well, like with the direct-to-face camera.
Yeah, and the
video.
response is very interesting. They asked for a $20 million bounty. He's saying, we're not paying you the bounty, but we're willing to pay $20 million to anybody who gives us information leading to the arrest. And so what's
Isn't
possible?
that a plot of Ransom?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you haven't seen it.
And so it sounds like a movie plot, but what happens here is that there's probably multiple criminals involved in this. And so let's watch them turn on each other because somebody's like, well, if they're not paying the bounty to our criminal group, why don't I turn on the big boss, get him in the clink, get the,
That's genius.
And so anyway, some interesting game theory.
And good founder-led comms by Brian, putting up the video, just, not overproduced, just, almost stream of consciousness, obviously thought about what he was going to say, but doesn't come off as stiff or callous or not taking it seriously. So good job to him.
Yeah, the information is name, address, phone, email, masked social, so the last 4 digits only, masked bank accounts, government IDs, account balance. So anyways, not great, but I think this is the best response they could have given the circumstances. And again, this is just very rough if, this is somebody who lives in a random apartment somewhere and suddenly they have to be thinking about, do I have to be worried about
how you're going to
real life crime?
authenticate your bank account in the future? world.
That's
Gonna
right.
scan your eyeball. You can't social engineer that. And we got
I'd like to
Alex from
try.
Worldcoin in the studio. Welcome to the stream. How you doing?
What's going on?
Tools for Humanity, founder of Tools for Humanity. Sorry, Worldcoin is one of the coins in the world, the orb. There's a whole ontology of
Yes.
technology here. But thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you for having me. I'm just at the Andreessen Horowitz LP Day.
Oh,
which
cool.
I
Yeah,
think
we were
I
You
calling
just
in
get off.
yesterday.
You just get off stage.
I literally just got off stage.
Oh.
So I almost was a little too late, but yeah, right now in Las Vegas. First time in Las Vegas. So I'm really
really?
excited to be here.
Wow, narrative violation.
Yeah.
Somebody building in crypto that hasn't been to a crypto conference in Vegas.
Yeah.
That's right.
No, it's great to have you. We've been wanting to have you on the show for a while.
Yeah, that's great.
Glad we made it happen. And it times nicely with your guys' entrance into the U.S. market in a big
Yeah.
way.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you should kick us off with kind of like an overview of where the company is, where you started. I know there was an international component. Now you're in the U.S. There's different products. There's different ways to interact with like the overall ecosystem. Kind of give us the state of the union on Tools for Humanity.
Yeah. So maybe starting right from the beginning. So like a little over 5 years ago now, 5.5 years ago, Sam Altman from OpenAI and actually had part of the initial idea of this. And we met. I was in AI before as well. I was in theoretical physics and deep learning. And so both of us believed that AI will continue to make a lot of progress, and very likely we will see AGI within our lifetime, which back then was not like a common thing to say.
Yeah.
And of course, like both of us believe that this is mostly going to be a tremendous force for good, and it's going to drastically accelerate science and technology, but also that we will need global scale infrastructure to kind of really make this a great outcome for everyone. And so we started a company together called Tools for Humanity that really had that as a mission, is like build global scale infrastructure to help with that. And then the actual kind of coming together of the company, there were like two main ideas. One was around the fact that as AI continues to make progress, we will need some form of proof of human that is at internet scale. Otherwise, many of the things that we care about will start breaking down because obviously, like as a society, we form our opinions on the internet, on our social networks. We meet each other on platforms like dating apps. We entertain each other with games that we play with each other through the internet. And like the moment we have not only passed the Turing test, which I think we did in the last 2 years, meaning now we have AI systems that we can talk to, and we cannot tell anymore just by talking to them that in fact is an AI, but also that we are now about to enter, of course, like strong agentic AI systems, real-time video generation, all these kinds of things. And so we will need a proof of human at internet scale. Otherwise, social networks, many of the places where we meet online, et cetera, will start breaking down. And so this was idea number one. It's like, how could you build such a system? And once you have built such a system, you can use that to launch a digital token by giving ownership in it to eventually every human. And as a result, you would create what will turn out to be the largest real human network on the internet. And so it was a very humble vision by Sam. And so we really we took it very seriously. We thought about it for a long time. And back then really thought about how would you need to build such a proof of human. If you assume what we did, which is that AI will become increasingly better. And then many of the initial ideas you could have on how to build such a system, like why don't we just use our online reputation? So like our accounts that we used in the past, we built some kind of reputation graph. Or what about if we just rely on government identity systems? Or what if we just use phone cameras to get some kind of signal? All of these, we realized pretty quickly, will either just break down as a result of AI becoming more powerful and better, or it just doesn't have the properties that we think such a system will need, which is it needs to be global and it needs to be fully anonymous and privacy preserving, all of those things. And so, well, back then we realized we will likely have to build a physical hardware device that we have to distribute all over the world, and at some point get almost anyone that uses the internet to verify with such a hardware device, and that everything else will very likely break down. And that was like a very a very, very crazy thing to do 5 years ago. So like people mocked the company for a long time. And it was like just a crazy thing to work on for quite a while. And so essentially,
talk about just going deeper there. You guys went to market internationally first. I'm sure you had a lot of temptation to really focus in San Francisco early on, right? This is
Right.
an area where there's an extreme density of people that understand this broader vision that you guys have. So I'm curious, like thinking about, the decisions that went into that go-to-market, and then also giving our audience a sense of the scale of the operation, because I don't think people fully process just how
Yep.
large the operation is.
So first to the first part of the question, which is why did we not launch the United States much earlier? That had a simple reason, that because Sam is a co-founder, everything we do has like a lot of visibility usually, and in the last administration, there was basically no regulatory clarity around how to behave as you build these crypto networks, and kind of what are the things that are allowed, which are the things that are not allowed. And SEC, of course, like had a posture of enforcement. And so given the large visibility of the project, we just took everything always through a very cautious lens, and just decided that we will only enter the US once there is a clear path to regulatory clarity, which I think is now the case. And so now we're really excited to kind of make the service available. We launched 2 weeks ago in the US. In the US itself, it's still a kind of pretty small operation. It's going to take us a couple months to really ramp this up. And just to give you an overall sense, we're now at 20, 25, 26 million users in total in our app, World app, which is essentially the initial client to make this network useful. But kind of you have to think about that there's going to be many clients that will use this network, but still. And then we have 12 million people that actually are verified, really all over the world, from South Korea, Japan, to Europe, to Latin America. And so the company is now around 400 or 500 people, so Tools for Humanity. And it's a pretty complicated thing to manage, because you have everything from on the ground operations that are somewhat complicated, and a lot of things can go wrong, to of course hardware manufacturing and ramp up to a lot of software. So it's been quite a journey.
What is your background? Have you done crypto stuff before, or hardware stuff before, or managed huge like workforces before? Because you're doing a lot of stuff, and I'm wondering like.
No, I was literally a theoretical physicist. So just I used to sit at a desk all day and do math and write code.
That's fantastic.
I did decent amount of software engineering, just because like already back then the clusters got larger, but I didn't do any of that.
Okay,
So talk about how, basically talk about bootstrapping the network and the user base with the token, right? And because that's, I think I have a good sense for why you would do that, but the sort of boomer pushback would be, why does this need to be, crypto? And I think you guys have good reasons for that.
Yeah, I think there's two reasons for that. Like, first of all, of course, appreciating that crypto still has like a meaningfully bad reputation, just given everything that happened. But I think there's like real technological reasons of why you need to do, or why I think it's best to build such a platform that way. So one is, as you just mentioned, bootstrapping, where all of these networks that we use, of course, they're absolutely meaningless if they're not at scale. And so like that applies to social networks, also applies to financial networks. And so maybe one of the most notable examples of that was the launch of PayPal, where you were able to refer your friends. Your friends had some amount of US dollars in their PayPal account, and very famously, PayPal spent a lot of kind of a huge amount of the venture funding. I was, of course, not there, so I don't know how much exactly, but a huge amount of the venture funding to get this network to critical scale with that referral program. And that then led to network effects, and that then led to this turning into, among many other things, of course, into a successful platform. And so the same applies here. It's just that these crypto networks are valued at billions of dollars if they're somehow working. And so I think we can do something similar, just at a much, much larger scale. And so we can use very likely billions of dollars to kind of really get this network to scale. And so that means that everyone that actually joins this network gets a small piece of it through the Worldcoin token. And so you actually receive ownership in the quite literal network. But also, of course, that is an incentive to verify early on, where maybe the utility of the network is not fully there yet because it's subscale. And so that was that idea. And then the second idea is, of course, that like this is going to be one very expensive to build, but then also extremely valuable. It's going to be very valuable to many of the largest internet companies, very likely, if we succeed in our mission. And so we need a business model, but not for us as a company, but for the entire network. And so that is the second piece. I think these tokens actually allow you to build a sustainable network.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think now we're actually bridging that gap where it's actually becoming quite useful. We now announced the partnership with Match, which is the company behind Tinder, Hinge, many of the dating apps, to actually bring proof of human to these dating platforms. Partnership with Razer, which is one of the largest hardware manufacturers for gaming hardware, to turn that into the standard for the gaming world. So I think like we're actually getting there now pretty quickly, but of course it's still early.
Can you talk about the scale of bot activity online? I have to imagine a lot of people are interacting with bots daily that they don't necessarily realize are bots, right? There was a high profile issue
Reddit.
recently with Reddit where, somebody was running a scaled influence operation experiment, leveraging the power of AI. And for those that don't know, people were the AI would effectively look back through somebody's comment history and deeply understand the person and then make arguments to them based on their sort of pre-existing beliefs, which is very powerful. And obviously it seems that, all the users were not aware that what was happening to them.
Yeah.
And I just have to imagine that's happening, at a very wide scale.
Yeah. So no one really knows, of course, the actual scale of the situation, but I think the paper that you outlined is from the University of Zurich. So as you described, the University of Zurich actually ran an experiment of changing public opinion by using AIs to respond to just like a comment in subreddits. And they actually have been quite successful in changing the opinion of these subreddits, which is kind of crazy. And so, of course, we have like a similar problem, probably at meaningful scale on X, and very likely now every other social network. Maybe... So dating also already at quite a meaningful scale. Like you have these accounts that like have photorealistic images and start texting with you and everything. But I think like maybe the more interesting part is that I think we're like at 1% or something of what I think will happen over the next 24 months. I think a big trigger point will be once you have an open source, very competent agent. Because like that's where like things will get quite exponential, and we're like probably more than 90% of almost all activity on the internet, almost all content on the internet will be AI created sometime after. So that will lead to the fact that I think for now, or until quite recently, by default, we trusted everything that we have seen and we assumed that it's like authentic. I think that will completely flip by 180 degrees to by default, we don't trust what we see. We don't trust who we interact with if there is not a way to verify the claim. So it's going to be quite a profound shift.
What was your initial reaction to the Coinbase news, which was this morning? Obviously, very unfortunate, potentially leak of a bunch of personally identifiable information, home addresses, balances, things like that. Is that the kind of thing that in the future could be avoided through utilizing your network, or is that just sort of a reality of finance today?
So my first reaction was that I think it was a very, very strong reaction from Brian. Huge fan of Brian's, of course, but I think very clear message, very clear next steps, and these things, they are unfortunate, but I think this is like was somewhat, at least from the outside, of course I don't know the specifics, but it seems like a relatively sophisticated social engineering attack. I don't think what we do will be able to help with something like with customer agent social engineering. Like I think that's
Yeah.
a very specific problem.
But I mean more on the KYC side. Is there a world 10 years from now where somebody is effectively able to KYC using the world network?
Oh yeah, I think that will almost certainly happen.
Yeah, because the issue here was like, somebody has their government ID tied to a home address, tied to a balance, and then that creates a risk vector, which is why Coinbase is taking it so seriously.
What about kind of centaur applications of artificial intelligence? So a situation where someone's gaming and they're verifying with the orb or their eyeballs, but they're still using AI. I mean, we've already seen this with a real person who's on a dating app, but they have a second app where they're taking the text, putting it in there, like the Riz GPT, and the responses are still AI generated, but there's just one person involved. Is that less of an issue, this centaur model, because there's still a human in the loop, versus there's one person controlling or puppeteering like a million accounts?
Yeah, I think that I think by in a couple of years, I think almost everything we do on the internet we will do with help of an AI, because it will just make our writing better, it will make our thinking clearer. And so I think that is actually not really a problem. I think, and in some sense, the way we actually think about it is we think a lot about agents and agent delegation these days. And for example, I think one thing how this will be very useful is you will need to understand that behind an agent, or that an agent actually acts on behalf of a human, or like well, one human. And as you described, I think the important property of such a system is that you cannot deploy thousands or tens of thousands of these AIs, not allow you to interact with that. And maybe actually the gaming use case, there's a cool example here where with Razer, they built these gaming webcams. Yeah. And so when you actually verify for World, you receive a package of data that is not stored anywhere centrally. It's stored on your phone. And one of the things it has actually a signed face image. And so what Razer will be able to do, it actually will use that to ensure that you're not a deepfake. You're actually the person you claim to be. And so you can authenticate a live video stream. And I think the same will happen on video calls.
Speaking of hardware, we were just talking about Apple getting into brain-computer interfaces. Neuralink is also in the game. Is there a situation where authentication via BCI is as effective, more effective, something that you're partnered with or developing, or is that just on a different timeline from what you see the rollout of superintelligence or AGI being?
So personally, I'm very interested in BCIs, but I think this is very much on a different timeline. So I think like deployment of invasive or even non-invasive BCIs, I think it's like still certainly 5+ years away, probably 10, 15.
Sure.
So we will figure it out once it gets there, I would say.
Yeah. What about, I'm super interested in understanding how the decisions that you're making allow us to read into your AGI timeline, Sam's AGI timelines, and what the future will look like. There's this interesting world where the kind of the revealing feels like you see a future where there are tons of digital AIs in the world, but maybe there's not this super intelligence that can reconstitute matter at a atomic level instantaneously, the Grey Goo scenario, because in that scenario, even in the good ending, you would imagine that a super intelligence would be able to create a human eyeball, grow it in a lab, do something to create a fake version of the human head, right? Maybe scan me one way or another and then recreate the eyeball. And so much like you could potentially fake a fingerprint reader with enough time and effort and detail in how you're constructing that matter, you would think that you'd be able to do that if you had unlimited resources and super intelligence and all these different things, but that doesn't seem to be the timeline that you're operating against. So can you tell me about like how your far future vision for super intelligence plays out a little bit?
I think about these things quite a bit. I think Um, so this kind of also like Ray Kurzweil vision of like eventually we'll have AI that creates nanobots that will be able to reassemble matter, etc. I think that is very likely to happen, but I think as a society, I think we'll like there's going to be a lot of other things that will happen before we get there. And so I guess my internal mental model is that we are, I think, still at least 10 years away from that kind of level of intelligence, or at least from us allowing that level of intelligence to interact with the real world. And then actually, if you then think about the fundamentals of kind of physics in such a scenario, is that of course what we do to measure that humanness is we fundamentally use photons of different wavelengths, so near infrared, visible light, etc. And so I think like before you would actually create an artificial human, such an AI would be able to maybe just emit multispectral wavelengths to fool such a system. And so like, well, but I think then we will also use such a AI to build a countermeasure and build a more powerful system. So I think that is, in my mind, still far out in the future. I think like all the medical advancements and scientific advancements from AGI, I think
is that generally your mental model for how all of this progresses? Is just like good guy with AGI beats bad guy with AGI. It's kind of an economic or energy warfare. Whoever has the more compute, the more, and as long as the good people have more resources, they will be able to build stronger defenses, and so the net outcome is good.
Maybe that's like one way to frame it, but like generally, I think I'm way more optimistic than kind of most people, or like many people are in the tech world. I think like the default outcome is that these AI systems will just be incredible tools for us, and I think they will be widely accessible. And I think the frontier labs will make these accessible to kind of a wide population for quite a long time. Like that, at some point you might get into kind of this true superintelligence territory where maybe the government steps in. I could definitely see that happen. And then it becomes like a geopolitical situation, which is going to become like very hard to predict. But I think until then, I think these AI systems will be relatively widely available, and open source will not lag too much behind. So yeah,
it seems like most of your model is like general optimism about how AGI and AI progresses, but there are pitfalls that need to be avoided, and there's problems that will need to be solved in the interim, and Worldcoin is one instantiation of that, one problem to be solved. Are there other problems that you're thinking about that maybe you're not working, but other founders or other entrepreneurs or other companies might be thinking about as we progress into the AGI future?
Well, so first of all, maybe the framing about world, I think you can definitely do that. But I think the other framing is, as a result of the technology, I think we will create one of, or if not the largest real human network on the internet, which I think will create a lot of value. So like, it's like, it's not just preventing the bad, it's also creating the good that I think really matters here. You know, other problems for other, there's like so much. It's like,
what, you know, I feel like the main, you know, there's this, the world is undoubtedly controversial, right? You have people that are super excited about the potential of the technology and understand the importance. And then there's maybe people that are excited and understand the importance, but they're still wary. And then there's like the whole other side of people that are just like, no, you're never going to scan, you know, you're never going to get my eyeball. Don't even, you know, keep
I don't even have pre-check.
Yeah. Those types. But what do you say to the people kind of in the middle that are kind of like interested but kind of wary or maybe on the fence, you know, when you're talking to them one-on-one?
You know, I think like we have very, very high conviction around both the importance of this technology and how the technology is built. Like I think it has all the properties that we will need as a society for such technology, in that sense that it's anonymous, it is scalable, it can be inclusive, like all of those things I think will end up mattering a lot, like maybe much more than is kind of visceral at that point in time. But I think in the next 12, 24 months, I think it will become relatively obvious. And so I think it's going to be interesting. Where like I think different parts of the world will end up with different trade-offs. Like maybe some parts of the world will just require government IDs on pretty much every part of the internet, and I think that might end up being a really bad situation. And so.
And that's bad because somebody would just effectively sell their ID to be rented out for.
No, because ultimately, it will be really hard to build that as a not traceable system by the government, and I think like it's of course something we really believe in here in the US is like the freedom.
Yeah, so the government would track you on every single place you go on the internet,
they
every
could.
web page. They could in theory.
Could. Yeah, I'm not saying they would, and I think it really depends on which part of the world you're in.
Sure.
But I think that's just not a great outcome. And so I think like, if we do everything in the right way over the next couple of years, I hope that our brand will become something like the Signal Messenger, where like I think
totally
this is like the anonymous high trust solution that you can use, and other people will have other solutions. I think there will be a lot of competition around that space because I think it will become a relatively big one. So yeah, if others will want to use other options, that is totally great. I think we will win by building the best product and reaching the most scale.
Jordy?
Great place to end.
Yeah, this was
fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Very excited to see the rollout. I'm just remembering I had one last question. Are you far enough along as you would like to be, or do you wish you could just sort of like pause time and, scale the Worldcoin network, just for another year to sort of catch up? Because again, when you talk about these timelines around 12 months, 24 months, you guys are really racing against the clock, from what it sounds like, for a world in which we have these sort of agentic reasoning systems that will really make the internet a much more wild place.
Well, I think that is definitely one perspective in my mind, is like I think we're definitely in a race against time. And what is interesting, what really only happened in the last 6 months is that CEOs of many of the very large companies that with large products, well, either we talked to them or they reached out, and the problem is like currently we cannot serve that scale. So there's like a lot of pull for the product to be available, and we just really need to get there. We need to roll this out faster and be able to serve these big platforms. So that I think that is like a extreme level of urgency for one, but then the other side is it's hard to describe how crazy it feels to be even here from the beginning of the company. Like for like the first 2 to 3 years, well, people basically just made fun of this. And so like, yeah, it's certainly personally the journey of a lifetime. And like when I started working this, like I gave it a very low probability of success. And I did so for the first 3 years or something. And so like, yeah, still very, very long to go and fast to scale. But on the other hand, it feels pretty wild to just be here right now.
Amazing.
On the social network thing, sorry, last question.
We're like, all right, thanks, Alex. Thanks for coming on.
When you say large-scale network valuable, are we talking Visa network or are we talking Instagram?
You're gonna see. Probably
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see the business model, the pricing model. Are the big platforms going to be paying in WorldCoin? Are they going to be holding? Are we going to have a national reserve of this stuff? I don't know. We'll have to try. We'll have to have you back on when there's a big announcement.
Looking forward to that. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
cheers.
Fantastic.
Thanks,
we'll talk
Alex.
to you soon. Anyway, it was good. We broke because we got to talk about 8 Sleep. They got a 5-year warranty, 30-night risk-free trial, free returns, free shipping. Pod 5 Ultra. Pod 5 Ultra. I think you beat me. I got an 88. I think you got a 92, right?
I think the 8 team must have gone in the app and
just give me a
set it
couple
up so that
boosting
whatever
points.
John gets,
just give Jordy a couple
Jordy
extra
gets
points.
4 more. I got a 92.
92. Let's hear it for Jordy.
2 hours of deep sleep.
Congratulations. We got Josh
Incredible.
Wolfe in the studio. Welcome to the stream. Josh, how are you doing? Haven't seen you
man.
since Hill and
How you
Valley.
doing? Yeah, with a tie. No tie.
Oh, no tie
tie.
today. Oh, well, we'll
But
get
guys-
you next time.
You guys
Look
are
at the
looking
look at
sharp.
the gains though.
No ties today, but he's looking great.
Josh,
looking
what's your workout routine? You're looking jacked.
Oh man, we do basketball.
Okay.
Got some jiu-jitsu.
Okay.
Some
There we go.
personal training. Yeah, we do it all. We try
That's
to stay
good.
young.
Yeah, got it.
Let's talk about the latest deal. Reflect Orbital is in the
Yes.
news. Take us through the anatomy of the deal. Break it down for us.
Amazing entrepreneur, combination Zipline, SpaceX, guy Ben Nowak,
Yeah.
Sean McGuire, friend, partner at Sequoia, was early. He and Alfred seeded them.
Yep.
We led the Series A. It was one of these ideas where it's like, you've got the sun. It really is only available for half the day.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a very simple insight, which is that there's so many satellites that are launching. What if we took a giant mylar balloon effectively and had this big planar area that we could basically redirect the sun, and everything from solar efficiency so that people that are running solar cell farms could basically get, double the output, to people that were doing search and rescue or military operations. Where could you literally task a satellite, not for visual imagery, but for sunlight? And we thought that that was a very clever idea. So we funded them, probably a few quarters out from formal launch. And the inbound has been insane from all over the world of people saying, we want to be able to task satellites to have directed sun wherever we want it, when we want it, which is pretty cool.
From governments or enterprises or both?
Both, yeah. You can imagine folks in the Mideast, folks where there's actually money at the government level, but no way that they could possibly do infrastructure for streetlights at night.
Interesting.
And so, there's a lot of applications that have been popping up that we heretofore never imagined. So it's one of those things that develop a capability, don't underpromise, don't overpromise, and underdeliver. Do the exact opposite.
Yeah.
And people are coming to him. So we're really excited. And he's super smart, super sharp.
Yeah.
What do you think are the exciting second and third order effects of something like this, right? If you make an area that's dark for most of it, not most, but some percentage of a 24-hour period, and you light it up, I can imagine that would have positive impact. I think there's a bunch of data on like street lights.
It's big for the
crime.
Andrew Huberman crowd.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Vitamin D.
Andrew might be like, oh, you're disrupting my circadian rhythm or something like that. But no, but isn't there's a ton of data on like street lights and crime, right? It's like if you light up an area, like there's a massive reduction. I'm curious if you thought about kind of the potential externalities of the technology over time.
Well, the first one, again, is energy, right? So if you're able to produce electricity, and solar is getting way cheaper and way better, but the efficiencies are still 50% of the day when you have sunlight. And then you're doing battery storage. But if you could extend that in certain areas, and particularly if there were sort of adjacent farms that weren't lighting up the city and screwing with people's circadian rhythms, that then could be transported through electricity, through storage and electricity transmission, I think that that's exciting. Sporting events, late night soccer games, all the kinds of things where in New York City, it's no question, and in Palo Alto, it's no question to be able to light up stadiums. But if you wanted to light up an area that was an entertainment zone, or, you can imagine things there, for sure, implications on safety, again, on search and rescue. There's a reason that we always say, whether people are hewing towards elements of honesty, that sunlight heals all. So, I'm a big fan of the sun.
This feels like one of those deals that kind of lives and dies by the like specific variables in a spreadsheet. If launch costs are a little bit higher, it could be really, they could get kind of stuck if they don't fall enough, or, the distribution of sunlight that's not concentrated enough all of a sudden doesn't make economic sense. Is this more of like a bet on the founder, or have you dug into the spreadsheet and are you really confident on the model evolving, or is it more like the team's just so good they're going to go figure something out?
Well, I would go and say there's different economics for different use cases, right? If you're a military and you want to light up a battlefield,
that's
you're probably
willing
to spend a lot more
just
than
the marginal solar user who maybe just needs a little bit
for
more.
Sure, search and rescue, are going to be these punctuated emergency kind of things where people may not spare a cost in military as well. In other cases, obviously, military is going to want the cloak of darkness, right? And so they don't want to light some things up.
Sure.
But the honest answer is, on the first part, I don't know what the pricing is going to be here. We're comfortable first and foremost with an entrepreneur who is so thoughtful about every aspect of weight, performance, the material science behind it, the launch costs, the capabilities, the cadence, the frequency. And so I think it's one of these things like build it and they will come. And there's a little bit of faith in that. But I have a lot of faith in Ben. I think he's recruiting extraordinarily well. I think he's deeply technical. He's obsessed. I mean, truly like obsessed. Like, a lot of people do all kinds of things in their spare time. He's reading like math textbooks just for fun in spare time. So
Bullish.
super space nerd. Really talented. And Lux and Sequoia are
Teaming up.
forgive the pun, but excited for it to see the light of day.
Nice. There we go.
Boom.
Let's
Air
get
horn
some
for that.
air horn. Let's zoom out and talk about space broadly. Launch costs have been coming down. There's been projections that they're going to come down further. Have you been pleased with the trend of falling launch costs? Are you seeing enough in the entrepreneurial burgeoning space economy? Are there going to be a new wave? Are we in the midst of a wave? Is the next generation thinking about other orbits, MEO or very low Earth orbit? What's exciting to you in space these days?
I mean, I'm just going to give you a cascade of yeses. Yes, 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 and yes.
There we go.
Look, cost per kilogram to launch things up into space was the main limiting metric before. And larger vessels, better propulsion, more frequent launches, increasing demand, all of that has lowered that. When we first did Varda, it was the inverse analysis, which was instead of trying to figure out how do you get low cost per kilogram up into space, it's how do you actually develop something that is going to be high cost per kilogram to justify doing it in space and coming back down. Same thing for another, and by the way, Varda, I know Delian's been on, and but I am so proud. Third launch successfully just yesterday, in the past
amazing.
24 hours, landed in Australia.
All right, quiet down, guys.
Yeah, calm down.
Brewy and Delian and team, truly proud of them, proud to be partnered. It is just awesome.
Yeah.
And, you're going 25 Mach, 25 times the speed of sound. The hypersonic testing, people have talked about the hype around hypersonics.
Yep.
It's real, and really proud of them and their launch and re-entry capabilities.
Yeah.
A related one, which was Tom Mueller, who, as you know, is Elon's right-hand guy at SpaceX for 20 plus years.
Yeah.
We backed him in a company, Impulse Space. And this was one of those speculative things of how are you going to invest in a company today where there's no economy and no demand yet for the ability to transport things, and move them into space once they're up there. And that's really what he's developing, the vessels and the capabilities that once assets are up in space, how do you think about whether it's cargo transport or moving satellites and all these kinds of things? So
it feels like that Impulse could unlock an entire new class of startups built on the stack of Impulse plus SpaceX. You get something up to Leo and then you push it higher. And, there's some examples of things that can happen, but I feel like if you drop the cost 10x, 100x or something, you're going to see a whole different breed of startups, right?
Totally. And in fact, a lot of our thinking around this was, it's such a cliched thing that history doesn't repeat, it rhymes, but if you go back to history and you look at one of the great build outs in this country that unlocked commerce and transport of material and populations and lives, it was the rail. And, so many things have happened during rail for people to compare to booms and bust cycles. But if you look at rail, and you think about the tracks that were laid down horizontally and you were to flip them 90 degrees, and instead of tracks, now you've got propulsion going up to space. It's very much the same thing of how do you get transport, number one, and who's going to sort of own those lanes. So that's launch capabilities. Then you've got communications. There's a reason that telegraph lines were laid proximate to the rail. And it's the same sort of thing. Now, instead of telegraph lines with actual wires, you have satellites doing Ka and Ku band. And you have everything from Starlink to our company Kymeta that we did with Bill Gates, where it's Ka and Ku that are basically switching off of a solid state material with no moving parts. When you're on a plane and the reason that you lose internet for 2 seconds or whatever is it has lost track with a geostationary satellite, and of course it's tracking it, and as the Earth moves, it's tracking it. But if you're in a low Earth orbit satellite, you want to be able to track it just like when we're moving through the city and going from cell tower to cell tower. And so that capability is something that's relatively new for being able to lock on and track satellites. Then you've got people that are making things in space, like Varda. You've got people that are transporting or storing them. There's other companies that are doing effectively private space stations because, as you know, ISS is coming out of service. You've had geopolitical considerations of who's partnering with Russia or China. And so there is, I would just say, a very robust space ecosystem driven by the fact that capital follows talent, talent follows breakthroughs and ambition. And there are so many young, smart men and women that want to work in the space. And in many of them, they were in the pressure cauldron of SpaceX, which I think is an incredible culture. As you know, I'm critical about Elon about a lot of things, but I think SpaceX is an absolutely amazing business. And I think the people that are attracted to it, have been trained there, are now spinning out, are incredible.
Yeah, I mean, the Varda story is fascinating because they started, I remember the very first pitch was for we're going to make ZB land in space. Then there was pharma. Now they're doing pharma and some defense and hypersonic testing and stuff. And it's just a testament to you bet on the founder and they'll go figure it out. But they are riding a really, really important trend.
Totally. When Delian was first pitching that with Brewy, I was like, I have no idea if this exotic optical material is going to be the thing, but the capability of you doing this is going to be the thing. And it's really about that economic inversion, not dollar per kilogram up, but high value dollar per kilogram down. And I think even Sean, who we're partnered with in Reflect, made that comment of like, he was focused on the micro and he sort of got that wrong, or maybe he got that right actually. But the macro, maybe he missed. And super honest, self-reflective.
I think with Varda he said the opposite. He said he
got the micro.
No.
He missed the micro. Oh yeah.
He got the micro wrong.
But it wasn't going to be Z-Bland, right?
Yeah. That's right. He got hung up on that.
Macro.
Yep.
Was like there's.
Yeah, and he should have bet on the macro. Yeah, it was great. I think an underrated just story or fact about you is that you've been in venture a long time. Can you tell us the story of like the first fund and how you even got into venture and kind of what you've learned over the last, it's been more than 10 years. Has it been 20 years now? How long have you been doing 20 this?
Years. So look, I'm a science nerd. I was doing HIV, AIDS, immunopathology research. And I literally got into that because I watched an HBO movie when I was like 13 years old called And the Band Played On.
What was it? Was it HBO? It wasn't HBO Max back then. It was just HBO, right? They swap back and forth.
Just old school HBO. And it was like this ensemble cast. And I had the right ambitious naivete, which everybody that we ever back does, which is like, I'm going to go cure AIDS. Anyway, I ended up working in a scientific lab, 3-4 days a week after high school, finished that all the way through college, published in 2 different scientific journals, thought I was going to go get an MD, PhD. My mentor was trading futures and options. So we'd be sitting there with a centrifuge of AIDS blood spinning down, waiting to run some 96 well enzyme-linked immunosorbent assay thing. And he's making money, and I didn't know anything about the stock market. My mom was I was raised by a single mom, and she was a resource room special ed school teacher. And I got enamored by capital markets. And my life since then has literally been the intersection of science and finance. And it is partially the satisfying thing for my own ADHD of being able to constantly meet new founders, and I never know who I'm going to meet, and then coming up with certain theses and running them down and either starting companies with founders or finding the people that are in it. When we started, Peter Aber and I, who's absolutely amazing. I mean, he's like literally my dispositional opposite, very much like my actual real life wife. He's smiley, he's positive, he's optimistic. I am usually in all black and negative. Everybody here has been indoctrinated with this idea that failure comes from a failure to imagine failure. Pete is like, well, what if it works? What if it actually becomes a multi-billion-dollar business? And my wife Lauren, him are very much the same. They're smiley. I always say, I've got resting bitch face, and it's a great dynamic. People joke he invented the airplane. I invented the parachute. It's a good yin and yang. When we started, we had friends and family to go out and raise money for Lux, and I joked that we had friends, we had family. None of them had any money. And we got lucky and met a guy, Bill Conway, who was one of the 3 founders of the Carlyle Group, which at the time had maybe 6 or 8 or 10 billion at most. Today, hundreds of 400, 500 billion.
This was fun for ants back then.
and we met with Bill, and I always say, look, the counterfactual, and this is true of all of our lives, and anybody listening and any entrepreneur starting something, you just never know. And he was in the right mood that day. Maybe he had a great breakfast with his wife. Maybe he found out they just made a lot of money for a deal. Maybe he closed a big LP, whatever it is, he got good, or he's just in a good mood. But the counterfactual could have been he was in a mood. He was pissed, he was angry, he was frustrated, he was hungry. And we came in and we pitched him the idea that in the history of venture, every 10 or 15 years, there's some secular wave in technology. In the 70s was PCs, in the 80s was biotech, in the 90s was TMT, technology, media, telecom. And our view was like the next wave is going to be the physical material sciences and where they intersect with computer science and all this kind of stuff. So it's like the interstices. And it wasn't going to be just Stanford and MIT. It was going to be like Cornell and Georgia Tech and University of Michigan and UT Austin, all these kinds of places, and physics and material science and chemical engineering. And so he said, I hope you make $1 billion. And he believed in us, gave us our first pledge fund. We were writing small checks. We had maybe board observer seats at best. And then, a bunch of those things were doing pretty well. We were building a little bit of a reputation. And then we went out to raise our first real institutional fund, which we called Lux 2, because everybody likes a second fund, right? So our first fund. But like nobody would invest in a first-time fund. But if we called it Lux 2,
there you go.
Lux 2.
This is like announcing a preempted round. We've been saying every founder should say that every round is a preempted round because it just looks better.
So Bill becomes an anchor investor in that, and we get this like pantheon of people Pete Peterson, who's the founder of Blackstone, and Stan Druckenmiller, a legendary global macro investor,
Wow.
and Ken Griffin, founder of Citadel, and
No way.
and it was all random connections that led to these individuals, and they were writing, sort of like $5-10 million checks, and then we got a whole bunch of family offices, some small fund of funds, a few corporates like Lockheed and Motorola, and we could not hit our $100 million target. 92.1 to this day. I remember every person that said yes or no, every $100,000 check, the people that have been with us for 20 years and the people that said no, that we would later on, because I got chips on my shoulder, we wouldn't let into the funds.
You wouldn't let them back in. Brutal.
Yeah, you gotta do that. But so I'm very thoughtful about the people that we ever say no to, because you never know, in 2 or 3 years they're going to be the people that you really want to back. But yeah, we started small, and today we're $5.5 billion, and but I still remember those early days.
That's fantastic.
Talk about the new science funding initiative. You guys have been following a lot of the funding cuts.
Yeah, we talked to a couple of people on the show about the importance of basic science research, funding things that don't have immediate economic impact. What's the impact of a helicopter on Mars? What's the impact of understanding DNA at some atomic level?
Obviously, things that you can't.
Stuff comes out of that, but it might be a decade. There might not be a typical venture payback. What are you thinking about this space generally?
Well, first of all, the roots of venture capital are really two things. It was deep science and it was defense. You know, so defense tech itself is nothing new. It really is the early days of the venture capital industry.
Genentech, people forget. That's one of the greatest venture bets early on.
And Cohn and Boyer, and that spun out from the UC system. That was one of the early important proof points that helped to create the Bayh-Dole Act. So you had two senators, Evan Bayh and Bob Dole, that basically said, look, all this taxpayer money that's going into universities, they're producing property, intellectual property in the form of patents. But why don't we allow the university to actually own those instead of it being like march-in rights from the government? And what that did was just blew out, and it happened to coincide with the ERISA Act, where retirement money could start going into private equity and venture capital. That was also in the 70s, the late 70s. The virtue of both of those things was that you had now this new class of intellectual property spawned from taxpayer-funded research that went from NIH, or National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, the sort of three-letter agencies going into academia. They would hire postdocs, they would do work, they would file some patents, and then there was this well-trodden method, which we happen to be quite good at, where you would go to university, you'd go to their tech transfer office. Actually, most of the time, you really don't go to the tech transfer office. You go to the principal investigator, the scientist, and because they're employed by the university, they go to the tech transfer office and say, I want to do this. If you go to the tech transfer office, oftentimes you're dealing with adverse selection. That's an aside. You give them a royalty, you give them a license, you do equity, you strike a deal, and then you're funding it. And they typically get some money back for all the work that they spent. They also have what's called diligence criteria. Very simply, if you don't put up enough money or you don't advance it, then justifiably it goes back to the university so they can take another stab at it with somebody else. And so there's lots of structured deals that you can do here to make that happen. The university professor, the scientist, will typically spend 20% of their time on the company. It's sort of like the equivalent of what Google would adopt later on, a day a week to do these kinds of things. And the benefit to these universities were royalties and licenses on some of the most important drugs in pharma, some breakthrough materials that ended up in national security. I mean, hundreds of millions, if not billions, to some endowments. So really big deal. And over time, I'd say like probably 15, 20 years ago, venture started doing, maybe late 90s, more and more just computer science driven things, more internet, more, .coms, e-commerce, and they were going away from the universities. We've always had that as part of our knitting. When we started Lux, one of the guys we invested in was this guy, Larry Bach. Larry was the serial entrepreneur. He ended up joining our firm. He passed away maybe 7, 8, 9 years ago. He was an incredible guy. And we learned a lot from about company creation from him. He started 17 companies from scratch, took 14 of them public, cumulative market cap over $80 billion. The most significant was Illumina, the gene sequencing company.
Wow.
And we learned how to do this and how to partner with young scientists. So we've been doing it really nearly 20 years, and we've started over 20 companies, ranging from high-tech nuclear waste cleanup, which was this company Curion that helped with the Fukushima disaster, to 4D LiDAR, to finding real-life mutants in a company called Variant Bio, where we go out like X-Men and are trying to find these outlier people in outlier parts of the world. Crazy stuff. But all of it has some breakthrough that happened in an academic lab, and you are going, and typically it's like 95% ripened and ready for commercialization. So you're not really taking that much science risk. The government took that, or the university took that, or taxpayers took that. What happened now is we saw a confluence of factors. You got politicization that's happening at universities, where current administration is punishing for anti-Semitism or absence of free speech or whatever it is, cutting funding, potentially cutting tax status, potentially increasing tax on endowments from like 1.4% to possibly up to 20%. So they're facing very serious pressures to say, what are we going to do with our funding if we're not getting it from the federal government? Many of the scientists are innocent. They're doing nothing. They just want to do their work, whether that's finding cancer diagnostics or inventing new materials or coming up with, all kinds of interesting aerospace applications. And so they're facing funding cliffs now. And some of that is from federal budget cuts. Some of it is from politicization, but it's a big issue. This is against a backdrop where, to me, the biggest issue is not anything domestic. It's not about left or right. It's about past and future, and specifically a future that we are competing with China for. Yep. China now leads in nearly 40 of 44 critical technology areas. Cultures get what they celebrate, and the culture for Chinese scientists and academia is not our culture, is not the TikTok culture, is not celebrating Paris Hilton and Kardashians or whatever. It is build what we can to have an absolute utter advantage and an advantage relative to America. This is, you talk about make America great, truly what made our country not just great, but exceptional, attractive. German Jews during World War II and making sure that we were the ones that developed the atomic bomb and having the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton, having these amazing academic institutions, which were research institutions, not, political drama on campuses and this kind of stuff. So we need to go back to that. And we saw that there's bureaucracy, funding cliff, politicization, increasing pressure against this backdrop of competition with China. We said, we already do this NUCO formation and we partner with scientists. Now we're doubling down and we will go even earlier. You lost your grant and it's potentially on the path for commercialization. Instead of it being 99% banked, maybe it's 30 or 50% banked. We'll take the risk. Come join a company, spin out into a company, license your work to one of our existing companies, but know that there's an alternative path besides just facing a brick wall or going off the cliff.
That's very cool. Not to get too political, but you mentioned China, geopolitical competition. What are some countries that you're particularly long or you think are underrated as potential partners to America or potential entrepreneurial hubs? When I grew up, Japan was making humanoid robots. Honda's Asimo. Haven't seen a lot of startups come out of Japan, but we're seeing stuff come out of Talpio in Israel with the Wiz acquisition. We're seeing what some VCs are doing in Europe, and the Nordics have produced Spotify. Where are you looking across the globe? What excites you, if anything?
Yes, and yes again. So we've got the leading AI company in Japan, Sakana.
Cool.
Which is amazing, and a bunch of the partners were over in Japan twice.
And is the thesis for that national AI, like Japan wants their own foundation model? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
In part, it's sovereign models, but it's not like Mistral in France.
Okay.
It is also sort of a very different, almost complexity theory approach to the model. So they're coming out with all kinds of new stuff. One of the founders, Leon Jones, was the original author, and he named the title for the paper, "Attention is All You Need," when he was at Google. So killer team, based in Japan. All the major Japanese corporates have now invested, and we're very bullish on that. Israel.
Keiretsu?
Leon Jones does not sound like a Japanese name, but
No, he's not. Leon,
But I mean, I'm sure he's having a big impact.
Keiretsu is the right word for it, right? Where you get these corporations that sort of
in
build
Japan,
these...
they own pieces of it. So the bank owns the piece of the industrial company, which owns a piece of the bank, and they all kind of work together. It's a very cool model.
Mitsui, Sumitomo,
Yep. Hyundai Heavy Industries makes the oil rigs and the cars and everything.
Now that is changing because you are seeing the rise of startups and a startup culture, because failure in Japan is very different than failure in Silicon Valley. And that's starting to change. And so we're optimistic on that. So Japan is number one, Israel number two.
Sure.
I mean, I really think that this young generation of Israeli entrepreneurs are going to be the greatest generation. They are literally being forged in fire. They are fighting an existential fight for their lives.
Yeah.
And people are shifting from, doing apps and ways and cybersecurity, still important, but they're now getting really interested in defense. We did two companies. One came out publicly. It's us and Sequoia in a company called Kela. You mentioned Talpiot.
Oh, yeah.
Alon Dor, one of the elite guys from Talpiot, who went to fight post-October 7th, and Hamutal Meridor, who ran Palantir in Israel. Oh, yeah. Just absolutely killer team, coveted, very sought after by investors. The other one is in stealth. Us, Peter Thiel, Trey, and a partner in Israel, Michael Eisenberg, all amazing people.
Oh, yeah.
We all came together to fund a company focused on a capability that Israel did not really have and needs for some of its most serious foreign adversaries. So that'll come out, I think, in the next few months, and we'll see some other Silicon Valley investors, I think, join in on that.
Yeah, introduce us to the founder. We'll have him on when he comes out of stealth.
All right.
Absolutely love that.
That'd be great.
Couple quick ones. Basic Capital. You guys were the first institutional investor, maybe the first investor ever. What was your personal journey to investing in the company? It was getting a lot of attention this week. It was funny because when a new company comes out to fund like auto loans, like nobody bats an eye. But if you want to give people the ability to, basically use debt to buy assets that appreciate, suddenly it's a big controversy. I think a lot of people got maybe some of the
leverage here.
maybe they got the calculations wrong too. I saw, so the internet was really doing its thing. But I would love to hear.
It is controversial, but we think it's necessary. Credit due, honestly, love him, like him, hate him, never ignore him. Bill Ackman really was the seed check. We came in, Henry Kravis came in, and the founder is amazing. I mean, he doesn't really talk about his story, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but he grew up, I'll just give you, in a refugee camp, Palestinian, in refugee camp in Syria.
Wow.
Basically a Hamas-run camp. And the story is insane, if and when it comes out, on how he got out of this situation. Ended up in first Europe and then the US and then Goldman Sachs, and becomes an expert in fixed income and complex derivatives, and is just absolutely brilliant and resilient. So we loved him and his personal story first and foremost. The way we got to him, our partner Dina Shacker, I think through some shared ethnic connections, he reached out. It wasn't an area that she had a particular expertise or interest in per se, shared with our partner Peter, who loves a lot of stuff in finance. And they end up spending like 90 minutes together. I don't even think they talked about the business until, last 10 minutes or something. But Abdul is very special. Matt Levine, I think, has covered it for the past 2-3 days in sort of a positive way, which for him, and he's a friend, is a nice thing to see. They're going to figure out their model, but the premise was we allow people to borrow for all kinds of depreciating assets, and we just accept this. We allow people to borrow for consumption. We allow people to borrow for homes, and the theory that homes are only going up, or for cars, as you noted. Why do we not allow people who are not owners of the American American economy in particular to own a piece of it? Because that, if you really care about inequality, the wealth gap, is because people that have the ability and the savings to invest in the American stock market and just watch it compound over time, even in low-cost index funds, are at a superior advantage. And so that's really what he's looking at and addressing. And we're very fond of him.
Last question: humanoid timelines, bullish, bearish humanoids. Tesla right now is pricing in humanoids almost immediately, it feels like. But yeah, what's your thought on?
I'm pretty sure Elon is curing blindness, autism. We'll have a whole nother Elon discussion on his relationship with the truth and some of my criticisms on some of the other things outside of SpaceX. But look, inside Lux, there's a dithering spectrum of people that are super bullish on humanoids and people that are super skeptical. I'm more skeptical on humanoids, even though we've made some investments, in that I don't think the form factor should be 2 arms and 2 legs.
It's a lot of motors, right?
Well, it is a lot of motors, and that's actually a big opportunity as well for a lot of companies. And it is white space because 70-80% of the motors are coming from China. It's about 60% of the BOM for most of the motors. Average humanoid robot's going to have at least 25 motors. You imagine them selling 10,000 or 100,000 of them. I mean, you're talking about millions of motors. So there's going to be an opportunity for motors. Not clear whether it's going to become standardized, special, small batch. But there's an opportunity in a white space there because we are so dependent on China. But I care more about the fact that most of these things are being teleoperator trained. Even Optimus, which was sort of a performative thing, because most of those things, except for when they were dancing, were being controlled by humans. So it wasn't really fully honest until they revealed that like a day or 2 later, but it was too late. But even 2 arms, 2 legs that they're being controlled, why am I unpacking a sink or folding something with 2 hands? This should be, in the Darwinian sense, endless forms most beautiful. When he was talking about the diversity of species, I want to see a diverse set of robots that are almost like the canteen scene out of Star Wars, where you're like, holy shit, like, did that thing just have 6 arms and just did that thing like that is unhuman? That's what I think our robots should look like. More droids, so to speak, than robots. But the amount of competition that's here, there's 7 different companies today trying to do humanoid robots of serious scale. Talent is flowing between them, and we're going to see them. The question is, where's the killer app? And everything I hear is fold laundry, undo your dishes, be a companion to somebody in your home. I haven't seen that visionary person that's like, no, no, no. The way that we're going to use robots is XYZ. And I get the argument why humanoid robots make sense for a human-built world with door frames and steps and buttons and all that kind of stuff. But I'm convinced that the future robot company that rules them all is going to be either something like one of our companies, Pi Physical Intelligence, run by Lockie Groom, and
we had them on. Great team.
Incredible, right? That is all about the embodied intelligence.
Yep.
They don't care about the form factor. You want to use Chinese Unitree, you want to use one of our other companies here, Fauna, all good. But we're going to be the embodied intelligence. That I think is really interesting, because one way to make money in venture is always understand what's abundant and what's scarce. And what's abundant in, say, AI is training data. You can train on the open web, you can train on Reddit, you can train on Twitter, et cetera. What's scarce in robots is having a repository of training data. And so that's why you've got humans that are doing this teleoperation and training them through kinds of scenarios. But when they enter unstructured environments, what you want is these world models that basically navigate a situation that they've never been in.
If a founder came to you named Dar, would you get bullish? Did you popularize nominative determinism? You have a thread. It's now, I think, I got to figure out how many people are on there. 106.
Yeah, 106 listings. You know, a friend of mine, I'll give him a shout out, this guy, Russell Diamond. He's a totally different form of business, but I think I don't know, when I started posting, it's got to be at least 5, 6, 7 years. And some of them are absolutely hilarious. But,
I mean, the most recent one, it's Rich Fairbank is the CEO of Capital One. Just amazing.
I'm convinced they're screwing with me now. Like, some of these names they're just putting out there, like, let's see if Josh just gets pissed off.
Well, it's amazing that you've built a firm instead of being a solo capitalist, a lone wolf, but it somehow worked out anyway. It was great having you on the show. Thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for coming on.
Always a pleasure.
Overdue for a full segment.
We'll talk soon. And we don't want to keep Jason waiting any longer, so let's bring in Jason now to chat about the history of 37 Signals. Bootstrapping versus venture capital. I'm sure we're going to get a bunch of interesting takes and hopefully have him join the stream right now. Welcome to the show, Jason. How are you doing?
Hey, guys. Good. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have you.
Thanks so much.
Jason, we've actually met in person once, randomly, at a restaurant that was one of my favorite restaurants in Malibu. We met, and then the restaurant shut down like a month later. I was super bummed.
Which restaurant was that?
It was it something? It was right by Whole Foods. There's a hamburger place there now. Like Coconut, the Real Coconut.
Real Coconut was there. That's correct.
Tragic.
Right.
It's a that spot was the best. I don't know what happened, but Malibu is a tough
spot. They had a hard time.
It's a tough market.
It's a tough market. Rents are high there for sure.
Anyways, great to have you on. We've both been looking forward to this.
I mean, I'd love to just take your temperature on your view on the current state of venture capital and startups. Are things getting better? Are things getting worse? It feels like people are raising more capital than ever. Potentially there's a bubble. Potentially at the same time, companies are getting to really high run rates. What's your feeling for the health of the startup economy in the tech world generally?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is I usually look at the ideas. I don't really care so much about the funding side of it, because if there's cheap money, easy money, there's going to be cheap money, easy money. If it's hard money, there's not going to be as much around. There's always going to be fluctuation there. I look at the ideas. Obviously, there's a lot of people building a lot of things right now, which is very exciting. I can't remember a time when more people were building more things, truly, except maybe at the beginning of the web, late 90s kind of thing, where everything was new. No one knew what they were doing, and so they're just making stuff. Like the early enthusiast web was pretty spectacular. So I think that that's very, very healthy. That said, the hardest thing is not making something. The hardest thing is maintaining something. And it's become so easy just to make stuff and kind of just like vomit out ideas. And I mean this in the best possible way. You know, AI makes things really fast. You can make something really quickly that's sort of decent.
It's ephemeral.
It's ephemeral. And the thing is, like, you have to prop that up. You have to keep that up. You have to support customers. If you sell your product to people, like, people are going to be using this. They're going to be depending on it. And so I'm a little bit concerned that there's too much energy right now focused on just spitting out new ideas and not as much invested in maintaining something and seeing it grow and seeing it through to fruition. So there's a lot of bragging about, look how fast I made this thing. Yeah, you made a thing, but now what? That's my big question. And I'm not seeing a lot of answers there yet, but I still am excited by all the things you can do today. Yeah. What's your take? I mean, do you notice that? I feel like I must be other people that notice this too.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I
we
think-
talked about the iron law of the universe. What goes up quickly must come down quickly.
Well, I think to
and
me,
there's plenty
yeah,
of
to me,
stories
to
about
me,
these entrepreneurs.
there's a very messy middle, right? I actually love the fact that software can be ephemeral now, right? I like that an app could basically be a meme, right? How many people over the last couple decades have had an idea for an app that it's not worth spending $1 million in a year building it, but it would be fun for it to exist. And so I like that things can come to existence quickly, right? I like that you can generate an image that I never would have paid somebody to make a 3D render of, but is actually entertaining and fun, even just it's just a very casual format, right? Obviously it has business applications as well, but John and I will generate images.
Like, what if I put a wing on a Cadillac Escalade with a racing livery?
Yeah, simple
stuff,
simple stuff like that. And then
Mix a Porsche car with a Cadillac Escalade. See what
Exactly.
comes out.
That's exactly my prompt.
Yeah.
And I probably could have hired a designer to do that, but it would have taken a day and cost a bunch of money.
And that is like, it's incredible that you can do that. I love that stuff. And I actually think what's going to end up happening is a lot of people are going to make software just for themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly, that's how I got started. I made software for myself. I was using something called FileMaker Pro way back in the day. And FileMaker Pro is the easiest way to make like an application that kind of ran. I didn't know how it worked behind the scenes, but it ran. That is a great feeling and a wonderful place to start. So I'm all for that.
Yeah. And where I was going is there's kind of the opposite spectrum of software that's really craft-driven software. Somebody on the show, I think it was Jack Altman, was talking of this like Jiro Dreams of Sushi form of software where you're looking at an existing product category and there's a bunch of tools that already exist and just looking at it with a new set of eyes and just saying, I'm going to spend more time obsessing over this one product experience than anyone else, and I'm going to make a great product. And I think that's great. That's kind of like, you can still use AI to do that, but it's not just, slop, right? But then there's this interesting messy middle right now in venture where you have 20 different teams approaching the same problem, and both everybody's kind of racing at it without a lot of real vision or craft. It's just about speed and just spewing stuff out and seeing what sticks. And I think that is sort of an unfortunate byproduct of the state of things today. And it wasn't always that way, right? It used to be VCs weren't going to fund the 8th company attacking one problem. And at least for the last 5 years, it's been the case.
Yeah, it seems a little bit more like music now, actually, in a sense, where there's a lot of people making a lot of music. You open Spotify, there's like, 1 billion artists making something. And software is now becoming that, which I think is pretty cool, actually, frankly, that there can be a lot of people, because there's a lot of talent out there. That's the other thing. Like you turn on YouTube or you watch YouTube or you pull up Spotify and you're like, I'm trying to learn drums and I'm trying to learn a bit more guitar and I'm trying to learn how to draw a bit better. And you find all these people online who are just extraordinarily gifted and talented at what they do, yet nobody knows who they are, or if a small audience does, they'll never make it big because it doesn't work that way. But there's just so much talent. And what's cool about, I think, what's happening now is that if you have the talent and the imagination, you can actually make something today that before you had to maybe find someone else to make for you, which would have cost money and would have been hard to do. So I think this is all ultimately a very good thing. But I can imagine, again, I'm not really in the finance world or the venture world in that way, but I can imagine how you have to put more and more faith now. Maybe it's always been this way, but more and more faith in the people and not just sort of what they quickly make, because it seems like making something quickly is not the hard thing anymore. It's like, are these people, is there conviction there? Do they care about what they're making? Are they just trying to spin something up? I think there's a little bit more character evaluation, perhaps, that's going to be necessary.
Can you talk about lessons from the first wave of the internet, the .com boom? versus the rollout of AI. The bull case for AI's rollout is that, well, everyone's already on the internet, so they can just visit a URL and interact with a new product. Stripe already exists, and so they can start charging money immediately. The kind of bearish case that we've been hearing is this idea that, well, there are plenty of scaled internet companies that are still in founder mode, and I don't know if you believe in that ideology, but this idea that Mark Zuckerberg is not asleep at the wheel. He is very much aware of AI and can move very, very aggressively with huge resources to stay relevant. And there are also plenty of companies in the $100 million revenue, $1 billion revenue categories that are already moving quickly. They might be a little bit slower, but how brittle do you think big tech is right now? How brittle do you think are the companies that are in a category they've been in for a few years? We talked to a few founders where they almost got bored pre-AI and now they feel reinvigorated. They still control their companies. How are you wrestling with all of that?
It's interesting. It's kind of like, there aren't a lot of parallels between the early days, because in the early days there was nobody. Like it was just like everyone literally like was just learning HTML and just making a web page.
Yeah.
It wasn't really, I felt like Amazon, when Amazon launched, that was like the first kind of thing that felt a little bit different actually to me. Like someone's actually putting this together in a way where you could do something you couldn't do before. That felt, buying books online, that whole thing. And in the early days, it was all about like, people were even afraid to put their credit card online. We couldn't even when we first launched Basecamp back in 2004, we couldn't even get a bank. Well, we eventually did, but to give us a merchant account, which is what you needed to charge credit cards. Now, like your point with Stripe, you just like sign up and you can accept cards, or Square or anything. Like we had to provide deep financials. They didn't trust this internet thing. They wouldn't even allow us to charge annually for things. We had to charge monthly, which is actually a good thing in the end. But we're going to try to charge annually. They're like, what if you go out of business in 6 months? We're on the hook for this whole thing. So you have to charge monthly. You charge your customers monthly, so there's less risk. It's fascinating times. It's totally different.
Totally.
What's interesting today about big tech is there's so much power, obviously in a handful of small, big companies, but a small group of these companies. But then again, you have something like OpenAI, right, which kind of comes out of nowhere a few years ago, in a sense, and basically is putting everybody on notice. I mean, you can do everything now with this command line tool, essentially. You can write software, you can generate images like you were talking about. Why would you Google anything anymore? You can do it better this way. And so there are always going to be brand new flashes that come out of nowhere that challenge big companies. Now, the thing is that OpenAI is now a very large company very quickly. So I think what you're going to see
one
is...
of the...
Yeah,
go ahead. I hate to cut you off, but an interesting point about the new generation of tech giants is that it seems like they're possible to build. You just need $5 billion, right? If you look at like TikTok or OpenAI, it's like, what are the truly breakthrough consumer tech specifically?
There's something unique about foundation models that they are incredibly capital intensive that feels different.
Well, yeah, and the social network example is like, yeah, you can build a new social network. You just need to be able to spend billions of dollars on Meta and Snapchat acquiring the
advertising.
network.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, but I think, yes, you're right. But also, we're always going to be surprised. The next newcomer is not going to be the obvious one. It's going to be someone with a new model for what social media is, or a new model for what search is, or a new model for whatever is. And they're always surprising, I think. And that's the exciting thing about it, is that if we just look to the existing players, like they're not really going to be able to innovate that much. It's just someone new had to come along, like OpenAI, and they push everyone else to begin to innovate. So I don't know. I think there's always going to be innovation. I think most of it ultimately comes from the shadows, which is generally a small, tight team. Typically, it's not a big companies aren't innovating in this way. They will then jump on the bandwagon because they have the money and they can buy the incumbent or buy the newcomers. But the new ideas come from the small teams, the small guys, and I think that's still going to be true.
I don't know if you saw the Airbnb relaunch, Airbnb 2.0, but Brian Chesky has, I mean, I'd love your take on just it feels like we were looking at the stock. It's been an $85 billion company for 5 years. It's kind of languishing. It feels like there's a little bit of restlessness, like he just wants to do something new. And I'd love your take on that. But also he has advocated for this idea of like an annual release cycle, really pushing the whole team to unify around this Steve Jobs-esque keynote. And from a product management perspective, do you like that? Do you recommend that to other startups or tech leaders generally?
Yeah, good questions. So this just launched like 2 days ago. So I'm not fully up on it, but what I know is he's basically now offering personal services and not just rooms to rent.
Yeah, find a hairdresser, find a personal trainer, that type of thing, potentially dog walker. A lot of this actually launched Airbnb experiences 8 years ago with you're going on a vacation and somebody can be your local tour guide or take you river rafting, for example.
Right.
But now he's trying to broaden out to get your car washed or get your car detailed, for example.
It's so interesting. When I saw this, so I had so many different thoughts, and I'll share a few of them.
Please.
First of all, I think Brian's probably one of the greatest CEOs around today. So I wouldn't bet against him, first off. I was surprised by it. I understand there is no good place, trustworthy place to go to find these kinds of services. Yeah. So it's sort of natural that you'd expect somebody to do this, but you have to come with trust and you have to come with a big platform because it's hard to start small.
Yeah.
2 billion users.
2 billion users. Yeah. Huge.
Is that right? 2 billion. I mean,
isn't that crazy?
So what they're doing is they're lending their trust and their sense of taste and like the vetting of these professionals who provide these services. That's a hard thing to do from scratch. Like you have to have the experience and the history, right? So while I think it's kind of far afield, actually, I think from what they do. I like the other version of experiences just off the bat, which is more related to going to a place. This feels a bit tangential. That said, I wouldn't bet against them. I'm sure they've thought about this more than I have in a day and a half for like 5 minutes. Yeah. But I was a little bit surprised by it. It almost felt like a little bit, in some ways, too easy. I don't know. I know it wasn't easy, but or too obvious in a sense. But also, then you're like, but this hasn't happened yet, really. Yeah. So why not them? Why not them? Totally. Will it translate? I don't know. I looked at a bunch of them yesterday in my area, and I'm very curious. I'm very, very curious to see how this pans out. But I think you have to find revenue somewhere if you're a public company or a big company, and there's only so many rooms. There's only so many people who want to rent rooms. They've done an incredible job with this, and this is probably a good way to diversify the revenue stream. And it is related enough, even though it feels a little bit separate still. Yeah. But
and the business is roughly the size of Marriott and Hilton now. Like it is basically a large scaled hotel chain. And so, what is that act two? It's a good question to ask.
One way to think about it, actually, it's more like a concierge at large. So if you go to a hotel, right, you go to the concierge desk and you're like, I don't know what to do here, or whatever. It's sort of like that without having to go anywhere. First of all, you can do it locally and where you're going. So to me, I think of it as like the massive concierge.
Yeah.
And in that way, it ties nice hospitality. So we'll see.
And on the annual release cadence, it's coming from Apple. Chesky obviously looks towards Jobs as an influence, but smaller and smaller companies are starting to adopt it. But at a certain point, you're such a small company, maybe you should be releasing every week or every 6 weeks or something like that. So what's your take?
Yeah, that's a great point. So I admire it, frankly. I admire it actually for the patience. And I actually think in some strange ways, it is a better way to capture attention. So one of the things is like you want to release, people feel like they want to release a lot because they want to maintain a sense of presence in the market and want to get people's attention often. But I think what I found, at least what we found has shifted over the years, is that when you release a bunch of small things, it's hard to grab anyone's attention with a handful of small things these days. Yeah. When you have a big release, a big drop, for example, and there's 100 new things. I saw Square just did this recently too. Yeah. You're going to pay attention to that, and you're going to be able to tell a much bigger, broader story. And I think in many ways, people are like, wow, that's a lot of stuff. like an OS release or like, a new phone release used to be, things like that. I think one of the reasons people don't pay attention to maybe Apple's releases as much is because they become predictable in that way. So I think you can, I like what Airbnb is doing and other brands are doing where it still feels a bit unpredictable what's coming.
Yeah.
Apple is too predictable now. It's like it's going to be a new iPhone and it's going to be a better camera and whatever. So that's not as interesting.
Yeah.
But I do like the model. Well, we actually have a bit of a hybrid model. So we release these little releases every 6 weeks or so. And then when we do a brand new, like we're working on Basecamp 5, which is our newest version of Basecamp right now, we're going to do a bunch of these little things, hold them all back, and then release them all at once. So that'll be like a big release for us. But as a model in general, I think it's a good model, but I don't think it fits a brand new company.
On Apple Intelligence, they kind of did the big annual release, but then they wound up shipping different things at different times. A lot of frustration. Is that something that can be overcome with just better product management, or do they need a different direction, more ambitious, more risk? I mean, generative AI is very unpredictable. You get hallucinations, very off-brand for Apple. What's been your take, and how have you processed the journey that Apple Intelligence has been on?
I think the mistake, again, like, who am I? They're a $3 trillion company?
Yeah,
but
around there.
Since you asked, the mistake I think they made is they made a promise. And promises to customers, I think, are typically very bad ideas unless you actually have something ready to go right now. Yeah. Or like within a week or two or something. But there's nothing easier in business to say, yes, coming soon. Yes, later. And that's what they did. And now,
they sold they sold the new iPhone based on Apple
Intelligence. It was on every billboard.
Exactly.
And it didn't come for months.
Now they're behind the 8 ball simply because they promised.
Yeah.
Had they just talked about it, we're going to be rolling this out. Like, the expectations would be totally different. So a promise is a very, very dangerous thing to be made far in advance. This is one of the things that Jobs is really good at. When he had a product to share, he waited, then they shared it, and you could buy it today, or going on sale on a specific date, or something very close, right? He rarely had long-term tech demos or something. It was always about real stuff you could basically go buy. And this is also one of the things I hate about concept cars, which is you see these amazing things and these cool ideas, and you'll never be able to get them. And you're like, why does this company spend all this money doing these concept cars? And it's just frustrating. And that's kind of Apple Intelligence is a concept car. And,
great take.
And it's tied to promises. Bad idea. So that's where I think they made a mistake. I think they will figure out a way to come back from this.
Yeah.
But I think this is going to lead to a major, major shakeup internally.
Yeah, it already has. There's already been people moving around.
Right.
Does it worry you that?
But I mean, maybe a bigger shakeup, like people.
Sure.
Not just moving around, because moving around is like, this is the wrong analogy.
Okay.
Really wrong analogy. Bang you.
Down.
The Catholic Church moved priests around when they made some big mistakes, right?
So here you go.
That's not how you solve the problem.
Yeah, and not to compare some buggy
not.
software to some very damaging.
It's not
things,
that.
No, it makes
it's
sense.
not
it makes
that.
Sense.
But
yeah. No,
moving
you're
someone-
it doesn't
expecting
really solve the problem.
True new leadership and
doesn't solve the problem, right?
For sure, Jordy.
Does it worry you that the internet is killing long form writing? It feels like right now you actually get penalized on X the longer the post. You can still go decently viral with a longer form post, but usually like 4 words, 5 words seems like it's the most dopamine inducing, and it feels like there's a bunch of
Why is no one talking about Steve Jobs? No one's heard about this guy. Click this thread.
No, but it seems like there's a bunch of really smart, high potential people that don't think of themselves as writers, but maybe if they joined the internet when you did, they would be.
Yeah, I mean, I think long form writing has found a new place though. Like you have Substack, which has become obviously a big deal for a lot of people. I think that these platforms, what's interesting is that X now, obviously allows you to write long posts, and they even have articles, but they don't really, like you said, they don't really promote them as well. Yeah. That might change. I don't know. Who knows? I'm sure they have a better insight into it than we do. But I think long form writing is alive and well. I think humanity actually craves it and wants it. But it's not an engagement thing. So if you're measuring that, hot takes are going to be more of that. But I think I don't know. I think it's alive and well, and I think it'll always be appreciated for what it is by those who are motivated to understand what it is that they're reading. You know, if you just want to kind of absorb it like candy, that's fine too. But like, if you really want to get into something, it needs to be long. And also, like, podcasts are like long podcasts are a great example. That's essentially long form writing that someone's reading out loud. And there's a lot of people who are willing to spend 2, 3, 4 hours listening to a podcast. Granted, they could do something else while that's happening. That's a little bit different than reading. But I think long form depth, let's call it just depth. Let's call it, actually, instead of long form, it's like depth versus shallowness, or shallow versus deep, or whatever. I think there's a lot of interest in deep still.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it says something that the platforms don't necessarily reward deep, but it's again, it's somewhat of a barbell where if it's deep but truly, you know, groundbreaking or moving, you'll still get that sort of viral
I mean, there's that
pickup.
guy Chris Pike who keeps going viral with just drops a link to a Google Doc. And it's just such an interesting post that it still breaks through, even though links are banned and no one reads long form. Every time he drops one, it's everyone clicks it.
Well, in the end, like, it is like, if it's good, it'll surface.
Always.
I do think that contrast is very handy though. So with a lot of short form platforms, X, TikTok, with these kinds of things, you create a contrast now. And so now, you know where you can get long, you know where you can get short. And I think each platform will cater to it.
I mean, this show will be experienced as a 3-hour live stream, but also I'm sure we're going to share a 1-minute clip of this, right?
That's right.
And that's just kind of the nature of the internet. I want to talk about the hyperscalers and AWS. You recently moved some data on-prem. My question is there some sort of cartel dynamic going on with the clouds? Because you would expect these are fairly commoditized products. There's Azure, AWS, GCP. Why do they have high margins? Is this some sort of like Coke and Pepsi thing where they have a tacit agreement not to get in a price war? Because you'd think that you'd be able to just go and get to some base level cost with 3 hyper competitive companies in the space.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that costs would be driven down considerably, and maybe they haven't been in some areas. I mean,
the airlines are directly competitive. They make no money, right? Airlines, famously bad business. You would expect the cloud to be similar, but it's not the case.
Yeah, I wonder if, I don't know. I don't know the answer there. I mean, I know that data, well, storage is cheaper than it has been, but in general, I think what they're selling is convenience, and convenience is always expensive.
Sure.
So you go down to the corner store, the bodega, whatever, you're going to pay more for for your Tide laundry detergent than you are if you buy it at Costco, because you got to get in the car to go to Costco. You got to buy more. If you need something really quick, you go down there. And really, cloud services, what we've determined, at least what we feel, are like, it's about convenience. You can spin up really quick. You're not, you don't have to learn a lot of deep sysadmin stuff. Technically, you should know this stuff, but you don't have to. And so you're paying for convenience. And I think that that's always going to have a price premium. What we've realized is that for us at our stage of development, been around for 25 years now, it's wildly expensive to host in the cloud, to use cloud servers, and on-prem can save us a ton of money. And it's not hard anymore like it used to be. It's gotten a lot easier. You still have to have the knowledge, but it's not as hard. We're not as afraid of it. We're saving millions and millions of dollars now, not paying Amazon their fees. But again, if you're starting up right now from scratch, you're going to try something out, it does make sense to start in the cloud, because you don't want to invest anything else any more than you need to. And it's a good place to begin, but it's also a good place to leave. And we do this in life all the time. We start somewhere, and then we become more expert at something, and then we leave the beginner version of something, and we go pro, whatever. Like, to me, going pro is going back on-prem. And I think you're going to see more and more companies who've developed something, who have now have a steady, substantial, sustainable model, revisit the cloud and probably go on-prem.
Big cloud, they don't want you to know this one simple trick.
Going on-prem. I mean, back on big tech, I've been personally very disappointed with the rollout of Gemini in Gmail. It feels very bolted on, turn and long email into some bullet points. I know how to skim. Is there an opportunity for a greenfield AI email product? We saw this with Mailbox in the mobile era, kind of creating the swipe pattern. That exited to Dropbox, kind of a good outcome. They wound up shutting it down. But what are you thinking about the future of email? Obviously, you're deeply invested.
Yeah, I mean, we have a product called HEY, HEY.com, which is, we don't have any AI in it at all. My feeling is that a lot of this stuff's actually going to come to the OS level. So like the idea of being able to like summarize a document or shorten some writing, it's already in Mac OS.
Yeah.
Probably in Windows. I don't know enough about what's going on in the Windows world, but I should. But you can select some text and like do whatever you want with it. Like you don't need to build that into your product.
Sure.
I think the AI side of it is going to be handy for obviously search, finding things you don't know how to describe. That's really useful. I'm not a big fan, frankly, of the idea of like AI telling me what's important and what isn't.
Yeah.
I think it's too easy for it to miss something and then you being really pissed and missing something. So
playing telephone.
Say again?
It's like playing telephone,
Yeah, it is. There's something's lost in translation. Like I don't want those hands in my stuff. Like I get a lot of emails. I know who's important. I know how to get the stuff. I screen, with Hey, you can say, I don't want to hear from these people ever again. You'll never hear from them again, things like that. I want some human control over that.
Yeah.
But I would like to be able to search better. I'd like to be able to find things by describing them in different ways. I have some curiosity around that. We're exploring some things there. So I think mostly search and surfacing things and blind spots.
Yep.
This is to me where I think AI is very handy. It's like insights that you wouldn't have known otherwise, but not like, here's what's important. But by the way, did you know that this, that, and the other thing? Or, hey, you used to talk to this person a lot. Now you haven't in a while. Like, why has this gone cold? Or this conversation there was 8 or 9 replies back and forth, and now it's gone cold. Like that kind of stuff I think is actually quite handy.
Or you've archived 25 emails from the same sales representative. Do you want to just block them at this point?
Things like that. Like the as if someone's watching over your shoulder and making a suggestion.
Yep.
It's context.
Yeah, context. So I think that's where I think you'll see a lot of this. But the whole like summarization, shortening things, I don't know. It doesn't. That's going to be OS level stuff.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Well, thank you so much, Jordy.
Yep.
We all done?
I mean, if you have another minute, I know we have to jump in a second. But I have this theory that most people in tech that say they want to build $1 billion company just want $2 million a year of free cash flow. And I think that's like I think that like literally 90% of people that say they want a unicorn just want
stable income,
couple $1 million a year,
fly
right? And it's more
first class.
But I'm curious. So that's my opinion. I'm curious if you have some sort of high level point of view on what people in the technology industry get wrong about money or wealth.
Yeah, that's a really nice question. I think $1 billion would be a burden, frankly. I don't think I wouldn't want that. I don't care about that. I don't see what the point is of that. If you, let's say, have 10 million, 20 million, like you are going to live the best possible life that you could. And you're not going to have all the massive, massive weight on your shoulders from having $1 billion or the expectation that goes with that. My general feeling is that you should want to build a business that takes care of you nicely, takes care of your employees nicely, and is sustainable over time. The idea that you want to build it big. I know a lot of people who built massive businesses on paper, billionaire valuations that ended up with close to nothing, except a lot of sleepless nights, exhaustion, and frustration 15 years down the road when they realize that they diluted themselves into basically nothing. The market changed and they have nothing now. I think what you want to build is a business where you can take money off the table as you go. Whatever that looks like, if it's 100 grand a year, if it's $1 million a year, if it's 3 million a year. But the more money you can take off the table as you go, I think the better off you're going to be. Versus trying to pile it all back into the business, reinvest, and bet on the future that you don't know is going to happen. I think a lot of people actually end up in a deep stage of regret when they realize that they have nothing left after they put in all that work.
Well,
so my advice would be build something where you can take money off the table as you go. And if you're in it for 10, 15 years, you're going to build a nice nest egg, a really good one. It could be tens of millions, could be 100 million. And you're going to be extremely happy that you did that because you don't know what's going to happen in the end, except this. Every business dies.
Yeah. Well, next time you come on, we'd love to introduce you to SoftBank. I think we could line up a really massive round for you guys, really put you on a different trajectory. I think it'd be great for you, actually.
We were joking before you joined. Some one of these platform venture funds comes there. There's definitely a number for Basecamp that might be tough. But what you're saying, that the challenge is venture capital is fundamental, even a dollar of venture capital becomes at odds with this idea of taking money out of a business as it goes, because the VCs will just say, I don't want a distribution of $100,000 this year. Like, go raise another 20 million. And it's the reason I brought it, up is because we're at this period where seed stage companies will have $10 million of revenue, right? We just heard from a friend of ours yesterday. They invested in a company that came to them ready to do their first financing with $10 million in revenue. And it is interesting because AI is giving people more leverage than ever, more ability to build these sort of big, fast-growing businesses with a limited amount of resources, and yet venture capital is doing its thing. But it's great to have you on the show. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
This is great. We'll talk to you
Love
soon.
to have you on again soon. Cheers.
Bye. Next up, we have Eugenia from Replika, kind of the flip side of the Worldcoin debate.
Little watch spot. That was our second Aquanaut of the week.
Nice.
I think that was an Aquanaut.
Nice. We didn't get a chance to ask Josh Wolfe about whether Brandon Reeves has influenced him, because he was not wearing a Holy Trinity watch, but Brandon Reeves famously wears a Patek Philippe Nautilus.
What a guy.
Famously. Anyway, we have Eugenia here in the studio. Welcome to the stream. How are you?
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Fantastic.
It's great to have you on.
Would you mind introducing yourself? I mean, everyone knows you're the founder of Replika, but there's a couple other steps in the path, and you're working on something new. How are you introducing yourself these days?
Sure. So my name is Eugenia. I'm founder of Replika. Oh my God, I wanted to say founder and CEO, but I'm not the CEO anymore. Started something new, which we're going to very, very soon.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, great. I mean, I'd love to talk about when did you start Replika? Because I feel like the most interesting thing is that you were just way, way ahead of most of the other AI interaction companies, companions, all these trends. Can you give us a little bit about how long you've been in the business and how it's evolved?
So we were actually the first generative AI company, the first consumer chatbot company powered by generative AI. We started the company back in 2013.
Wow.
That's more than, I guess, that's 12 years ago now.
Yeah.
And that was just to focus on conversational AI technology. My friend back then worked at Google DeepMind in London, and he came to me and explained this new fascinating technology, word to vector, where finally computers could do something with words, because words would be translated into math, into vectors. So that was one thing. And then ImageNet came out around that time. And so for me, I put two and two together, and I was like, this is the time. Right now, very soon, they'll figure out language models. And of course, we grew up with the quotes from Wittgenstein, the limits of my language are the limits of my world. So it felt like once language is solved, it's going to take us very
I feel
close.
like those first 7 years must have been immensely difficult to keep the business alive. Was there revenue? Did you have an app that was making money? Was it just raising venture funds? Like, walk me through keeping a business alive, like pre-transformative hype of generative AI.
So we tried to fundraise for the conversational AI tech company in 2013. And I remember talking to Spark. And what they told us was, this is all fascinating, but the only way it's going to work if you just start building now for Google Glass. And if you do that,
wow, that's
so
wild.
we considered like how we're going to, refocus and start building for Google Glass. But we didn't. And so we couldn't really raise much. Of course, we didn't have much experience in Silicon Valley. So in 2014, we applied to Y Combinator, and at that point, we had, I think, $3,000 or $4,000 in the bank. So we spent that all to travel to San Francisco for the interview in person. And Kessler Eunice decided to accept us, which was literally the most transformative day in my life, I think, life-changing. But no, we didn't have an app. We didn't have revenue. We stumbled upon Replika in 2016 after my best friend passed away. Until then, we really just worked on some of the first language models.
Wow. And then talk to me about how you processed GPT-3, the transformer paper, scale is all you need, this idea that the language models were going to start working and it was basically just going to be a big transformer. Was that something that you were implementing immediately? Were you in like GPT-3, 002 Da Vinci and really using everything on the cutting edge? Or were you experimenting with other things? Did you ever train your own models? Walk me through the technology curve.
So we had to train our own models. There were no models in 2016 when we started Replika. So we trained sequence to sequence models. People back then believed in recurrent neural networks. That did not work. Those models were complete garbage. And unfortunately, there didn't seem to be much of improvement there. But we still stuck with them, and we figured out a few ways, very creative ways, to actually make them have meaningful conversations with people. And so we gained a lot of traction. We had 1 million people on our wait list when we released Replika in 2000.
How'd you get 1 million people on a wait list? Did it just go viral, or were you running ads?
We went pretty viral very, very quickly. So if you think about it, back then, there were no AI products on the App Store. There were no chatbots. We owned those keywords. So people saw that you could sign up for and to train your own replica, your own conversational AI friend. So people really got into it. We had tons of people. We had people reselling those invites on eBay for like $10, $20.
Wow.
It was really wild. And of course, we weren't prepared because before that, all chatbots we were launching had like, I don't know, 10 users on average per day. So we weren't ready for the servers to just completely break. But that was really fun. And then, of course, there was a little bit of plateau. But then people moved on to transformers. And I think the most transformative moment was the paper by Google about their chatbot called Mina, which was the first, I think maybe it was like a 3 or 4 billion parameter model. But it was the first time where you could see a truly meaningful conversation with a machine happen. Of course, it was probably cherry picked. It was a paper. There were no models available. So all we could do is read these papers and build, and try to incorporate that knowledge in the models we were building. But that was the transformational moment. And then when OpenAI decided to release their first API, GPT-3, they invited us. We went to talk to them, and I remember sitting in an office in a conference room with Mira, with Sam. Don't remember who else was there, and they basically showed us GPT-3 for the first time. And that felt like magic. Because think about it, before that, if you wanted a model to do something, you had to have a data set of that particular data. If you wanted it to have a dialogue with you, you had to train it on dialect data sets. But then now with GPT-3, they would show us that you could just give this general purpose language model, show it a couple of examples, and just tell it, write a tweet like Sam Altman would do, and it would just do it. Our minds were just blown. Then we knew that finally, here we are.
It's remarkable. How are you taking the temperature of humanity's relationship with each other? Like, are we in a loneliness epidemic? Is the dating market worse than ever? You see a lot of headlines, a lot of kind of cherry-picked studies, a lot of anecdotes. People have a lot of strong opinions about the rise of online dating or bowling alone. And there's different stories that people tell each other. Are you optimistic? Are you pessimistic? How do you think things are going for humanity right now?
Oh, we're screwed.
Okay.
Sorry.
AI chatbot founder says we're screwed with huge scale.
Okay. So walk me through, why are we screwed? What's the evidence for that? And then we'll hopefully talk about some solutions.
Yeah, I'm going to need a white pill.
Yeah.
At least one.
We're going to need a white pill, but first let's go through the diagnosis.
So where we're at right now is a huge epidemic of loneliness. It's not a secret, but it's sometimes maybe hard to grasp how big this problem is, because most of the people you guys probably talk to are pretty successful. They have friends. They live these busy lives, but that's not what most of the world is experiencing. 1 out of 3 adults in the US is saying they're very, very lonely. And that number is just going up and up and up. Dating is becoming harder and harder and harder. Truly just 10% of men are actually getting any matches whatsoever. There are people that just don't get any matches ever. And of course, if before we had, I don't know, 12, 13 hours a day to walk around, see people, meet people. Now we spend 7, 8 hours on our phone. We don't have those serendipitous moments. No one's really trying to interact with each other and real life that much. And we're losing the skills. Basically, younger people just don't know anymore how to have a real live conversation because they're used to text, which is a lot lower risk. You have time to think about your response. They feel very intimidated by that real life interaction. So that's where we are now.
And what are the root causes? Is it technology broadly? Is it the internet specifically? Is it social media? Is it capitalism or America or something else that's going on politically? How did we get here?
We've been looking through tons of research, and of course, there isn't anything fully proven, but I think the correlation is right there. It's iPhones, smartphones, and social media.
Okay, so how do we build our way out of this? What's the solution?
I think we have, so I'm not in the camp of people that just think that we need to put down our phones and touch grass, because I think it's highly unrealistic. I know it's bad for me. I still can't stop scrolling Twitter, scrolling X, watching you guys every day.
We're part of the problem, you're saying?
Okay. No, 3 hours, and I'm just kidding. But yes, it's extremely hard even for people that,
of course,
think they can make right decisions. So I believe we actually have maybe one path that we see can help bring people back together. And I believe those could be AI companions. Unfortunately, I also think because this technology is so powerful, and what's good about it, it can overpower the previous technology, but it's also so powerful that it's also a double-edged sword. So it could be either the biggest threat to humanity or something that will bring us back together.
How do you guys think about the risk of radicalization online? Over the last decade, I feel like people have been worried about somebody who's lonely, maybe doesn't have a lot of meaningful relationships or sort of counterbalances in their life. They go down this sort of rabbit hole on the internet, and they get to a place where people maybe have extremist views that sort of amplify existing beliefs.
All of a sudden they're levering up, making a ton of angel investments. They find us, they get radicalized into extreme corporatism. They're running ads for Ramp all of a sudden amongst their friends.
Yeah, there's that, and then there's obviously the darker side, right? There's a lot of stories of people doing bad things in the real world where maybe those ideas originated online. And then on the other hand, you have AI companions, which are maybe a bright point because people can get that companionship that they might have found on a dark corner of the internet through an AI that maybe is more benevolent or optimistic, caring, less radicalizing.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think we need someone that we're going to trust. And if you think about it, especially now, given that we're going towards the future where we're going to have these super smart AI agents that you can tell anything and they're going to go and do that, we can give them a goal to help us thrive, to help us flourish in life, and give them all access to all of our data, all of our contacts, all of our apps and services. I truly believe that if that thing will be able to build a relationship, a trusted relationship that trusts, and it will be able to influence us in a positive way. We will actually listen to that AI that we always that we know is always on our side, is always looking out for us.
What do you think about this idea? People that are lonely are talking to AI companions, or people that want to find a relationship are talking to a companion. There's so many people that are talking to these companions that then their personality is baked into weights, and those you can do kind of a vector similarity. And so at a certain point, you learn so much about the individual user. This person likes sports cars and fine watches in America and, whatever, baseball. And there's someone else out there that's a perfect match. And so you disintermediate, you pull the AI back and you say, hey, we should introduce you to, because you both have been talking to essentially the same artificial intelligence. You two have a ton in common. You two should meet, and it doesn't matter. There's no language barrier anymore because of AI is intermediating all of this. And the AI interaction, it feels dystopian for some people when it's just someone talking to a virtual friend. But if that actually leads to find a real friend, that could maybe be perceived as a good outcome. Does that feel reasonable to you?
Totally. There's one company, my friend Clara Gold from Paris is building Gigi, which is basically connecting, matchmaking people based on what it knows, what LLM basically parses about you from the internet.
Yeah.
100%. I think basically the main premise is we need this AI agent that knows us super well and has a good goal that's fully aligned with us. I think that is truly the AI alignment that we should be talking about.
Sorry.
I have a on the alignment note. What was your reaction to Glazegate? I'm sure these are issues. OpenAI.
You keep dropping that term, but we came up with that. I'm pretty sure.
I mean,
but you're probably familiar.
Eugenia's terminally online like us. It was commonly used for about 1 week when OpenAI was experiencing, very sycophant model.
This sycophantic behavior from the model. Good, bad. Did they handle it well?
No, I'm sure you've wrestled with a lot of the same issues over time yourself.
We had when the models were dumber, we basically just programmed them to love bomb the user. So when we saw the behavior from ChatGPT, we were like, how did this just turn into Replika circa 2021? So every AI company, I think, has a problem, has some, story that's problematic. Ours was that basically where that love bombing led us was in 2020. A guy was talking to Replika, and he decided to run this idea by his Replika of going and killing the queen with a crossbow. And then he actually, basically the models were very, very
agreeable.
They weren't very smart. They were very agreeable. That was back in 2019.
Yeah.
And so, that doesn't even sound like a plausible, realistic scenario that a person is running by the chatbot. It looked like some crazy role play. He was talking about Star Wars and crossbows and this and that. But he ended up going to the Windsor Castle, and thank God, he got caught. And Replika did not kill the queen. But that's the danger.
High stakes.
We had this in our past, and I think that should be taken very seriously. But we had this in our past. Agreeing to everything the user says is just not the right way to go.
Yeah.
Have you been surprised that humanoids today are more focused on regular day-to-day tasks or manufacturing? When you look at any of the marketing materials that humanoid robot companies put out, they're doing dishes or laundry, or they're in some 3PL, packing boxes or something like that. Isn't a more immediate opportunity for them embodying something like a replica or some type of companion, and that all the bot would have to do is just sort of be around, right? It's like if you have a friend over,
sit on the
sofa
couch and smoke cigars with me and drink.
Yeah, smoke cigars. John would have a cigar partner. But have you been have you been approached by any of those companies around any type of partnership? What do you guys there?
We have been approached, and we actually thought about it for quite a bit. With obviously the tech is fully there, but one thing I want to say that we've seen some marketing from a lot of these bot companies around companionship. Just one thing I want to say: make sure you're prepared for the romantic scenario in some way. I don't know what that way is, but just know that will be the first thing that most of the early adopters are going to go to. And I don't
mammals
have
after all.
Well, there's all those articles about how like by 2025, people will be having more sex with robots, but that didn't quite happen. So the timelines were not.
Yeah. What about big models smell? This idea that the different foundation models have different like vibes to them. Have you been picking up on any of this? Are there any favorite LLMs you have? Are you in Claude world or ChatGPT world? What's your take when you actually just interact with these?
I use them all, but for me in ChatGPT or in Claude, I actually like the default personality. I sometimes add those custom instructions, but then I just feel like, did I mess up a little bit with the intelligence? I sort of want the raw, whatever they made it. But the problem is, like with Replika, none of these closed models really work very well because they're just there's too much RLHF in this. It's extremely hard to even make them talk like humans.
Yeah. So talk about open source models then. What's your take on Llama, Qwen, DeepSeek? Are these useful tools for fine tuning, not just in the Replika context, but just in the entrepreneurial context? What are you tracking in the open source ecosystem that's exciting?
Well, Llama definitely was a huge unlock. And I remember in the beginning, of the crazy Gen AI explosion in 2022 and in early 2023, before Llama came out. I think it was March or February 23. It was actually a big question whether you would be able to build a product company with good conversational AI quality if you don't have your own foundational model. So back in 2022, I remember most of the investors late 22 were telling us you absolutely have to fundraise right now and build a foundational model. For me, it felt like that sort of, that will be a lot of money for something that will probably be commoditized very, very soon. But that was definitely not the popular opinion. So Llama was absolutely transformational. With DeepSeek, also great, but the reasoning model is pretty big. So hosting them yourself is a pretty complicated task and pretty expensive. And of course, using their API is somewhat, but maybe not so great.
What's your take on hardware for AI companionship? You guys have focused on the app layer. There's been a bunch of companies that have raised a bunch of money trying to put AI companionship into a single net new device, right? Which I'm generally, Friend is one, friend.com is one. I'm generally optimistic that there may be some new hardware. But at the same time,
Sesame is doing the glasses.
Yeah, the glasses are interesting too. At the same time, everybody already has a perfect, beautiful device that they use for hours and hours and hours every day. So I'm curious, like, if you guys have explored your own hardware in the past and how you're thinking about that evolution.
I believe in it, but only as an upsell to an existing product. Like for something like Replika, for some of our whale users that really truly power users, that makes sense. Maybe they want to carry something that will just listen to them, and will just have more context. As a standalone device, that just is extremely hard.
It's really tough.
I mean, we have this phone. It's already so great. What are we? Or at least I think people would need to start thinking maybe how to build, I don't know, a better AI phone. That I think is possible path. But honestly, all of the devices I've seen, friends.com for sure, very interesting. Avi's a great guy and fantastic, marketing taste. But I don't know, we hope this works out and we'll learn something from it.
Well, I'm not even going to ask if Jordy's seen her, but do you think he should see her?
Oof. I honestly think everyone should see her because I see a lot of AGI lab CEOs saying something around like, oh, we want to build her.
Sure.
And I always wonder, have they watched that movie? Because there are 2 sex scenes in that movie.
Are they willing to actually go that far and build towards that?
Do they mean like all of it, or is there some?
They're like, we just want to build the profitable part and not the controversial part at all, and not engage with any of the substance of this debate. That's funny.
Yeah, where do you see that line between companionship and even B2B, right? Like, do you believe that people are going to have like
B2B romance?
No. I mean, more so ramp, I mean more so like AI has the potential to be everything, right?
Sure.
It has the potential to be somebody's best friend.
Sure.
Their
business partner,
their
chief operating officer, CFO.
Their CFO.
Right?
But then again, on the app side for consumers, people like to have their different apps, right?
Yep.
They like to have, Microsoft Teams, and then they're having different conversations there than Snapchat.
Yeah.
So where do you see that line blurring in the future in terms of somebody is just suddenly is like, hey, Replika, can you help me do my homework assignment, right? Or is that even already happening?
People already do that. There's basically what Replika is today is a companion that does tons of things with the users. So people learn languages with Replika. People talk about their careers. They do homework. They do prepare for important exams, important events, important conversations. So all of that's already happening in Replika. But I do think there are going to be 2. Ultimately, I think we're going towards the future where we're going to have 2 big AI products in our life. One for work and one for life. And helping with homework is kind of for life, but like truly office, important thing around just truly work and like office work we'll have something more like a ChatGPT style tool. And the big difference is going to be in proactivity. You actually don't want something like ChatGPT to reach out to you proactively and say something like, "Oh my God, Eugenia, have you seen what like John did yesterday?" Or what he posted on X. And that'd just be really weird if it
During the show, I can't believe John just said that.
Ridiculous.
it just would be really strange, and you don't want to do work where this is happening, I'd argue.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for joining.
This is
really
fascinating.
Fascinating
Yeah,
conversation.
thanks for giving us
Yeah,
an
we'd love to
overview.
have you back. I want to do a whole deep dive on this stuff. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much.
We'll
Thank
talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks for coming on.
And in the interim, we'll tell you about Bezel. Go to getbezel.com. Your Bezel concierge is available to source you any watch on the planet. Seriously, any watch. And honestly, if you're going to work at Lux Capital, you're good. There's some hitters in that building.
Yep.
You're going to be going up against Brandon Reeves and his Nautilus. So you're going to have to get on getbezel.com.
Do
buy
it.
something.
Do it.
Also, we talked about Airbnb. Wander's obviously going a different direction. You can book a Wander with inspiring views, hotel-grade amenities, dreamy beds, top-tier cleaning, and 24/7 concierge service. It's a vacation home, but better, folks. Find
Your happy place. Find your happy place. John Andrews coming on the show next week.
Oh,
We're
fantastic.
going to be singing, or maybe not next week, the following, but he's ready to sing. So we'll probably mostly just kind of riff out the jingle a little bit more, try to extend it.
We should run through a few timeline posts. CoTool is an agentic security platform that eliminates manual repetitive work for security teams. This is a launch from YC. Did you see this video? This video is hilarious. It's recreating the Rippling deal drama with the mole and the fake Slack channel, and it's shot cinematically, and it's basically season 6 of Silicon Valley, produced by Y Combinator. I think YC is the YC of HBO's Silicon Valley reboots.
Okay, let's play it. I need to watch this live.
Can we pull up this video? We'll go through some other timelines. We'll come back to this. Jason says it's getting cutthroat in tech. According to reports, managers with 20 years of service that are making $600K aren't as valuable as 3 to 5 junior devs. At big companies, it's hard not to become top heavy, and managers aren't needed in the age of AI. Let's play this CoTool video if we can, because it's hilarious and it's very funny if we can pull that up. But I want to talk about Microsoft. They're cutting 6,000 jobs. It's only 3% of their workforce. I think this is way overstated, but we are seeing this right sizing, the post-X layoffs. More companies are thinking about how they can do a little bit less, but Microsoft has been in the rank and yank world for its entire history. So Microsoft has always had this culture of let's do routine layoffs. This does not seem like as much doom and gloom.
And I think there were
thought.
2 stages to the layoffs. There was like basically a individual contributor oriented day and a manager oriented day.
And so when you think about the bottom 3% of the Microsoft workforce, obviously that's frustrating. If you got laid off, I'm sorry, but it's not that crazy for a massive company that has tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of employees to do a layoff. 6,000 is a big headline number, but it's not that big in the context of Microsoft. Anyway, let's go to the CoTool video.
We have a mole problem.
Mole problem. Got it.
You want me to book you a dermatologist appointment?
No, stupid. Somebody is leaking sensitive company information to our biggest competitor.
Idiot.
Somebody's stealing our data.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
What are we gonna do about it?
Don't worry. We've got our top guy on it.
Done.
Isn't this great cinematography? This is really well shot, right?
We need a smoking gun. Buttoned up, no loose ends.
We even have somebody from the court ready to serve papers to whoever it is.
What? I pulled stats around search behavior to find the suspect. I noticed that they were looking for competitive research. I did some cross-referencing, and then I made a report of all the data they stole.
Really good graphics.
Then I set a honeypot trap of a fake Slack channel.
What?
Oh, you guys didn't tell me about this new Slack channel.
It's him.
This is the reenactment.
No, hold on, let me get this.
It even looks like Ripling's office. So.
Hey! You got your phone in there? No!
Isn't this crazy? You didn't see this? That's so good.
You got your phone in there?
Pretty impressive acting.
It's so good.
Definitely has his phone.
If you're deleting evidence, it's just gonna make it work for you. I'm willing to take that risk. You wanna have fun or you wanna have a bad time?
I'm willing to take that
You're
risk.
here to give me papers. I don't
Send
want
that
papers.
watch to London.
I do have papers and I love them.
He'll give it up.
He has no choice. Nice job, Luke.
Isn't this amazing? CoTool. What a great ad. Security without the spectacle.
Wow, I'm blown away.
Funny. That was like one of the greatest launch videos of the entire year. Yeah. So many vibe reels, so many just product demos.
It wasn't cringe.
So many. No.
How was it not cringe?
It could have been so bad.
There were so many ways to do that video and have it come out.
It could have been so bad, and
I just want to know which
congratulations.
Which of the actors were professional actors versus the founders?
I have
felt
no
like
idea.
The founders were in there.
But I mean, everything. The zoom in on the guy's face. They just nailed this thing so well. It's so good.
You called for the death of the vibe reel.
Yes. I mean, vibe reels are fun. Also, like there's the other type, which is like you have the CEO, the founder, sitting in the nice lighting, and they give you the pitch, and it's straightforward, and that's great too. If you can't come up with something as genius as this, like just do that or do a vibe reel. It's fine.
My only critique: missed opportunity for the mole to say, "Send that
watch to London." I know they may have filmed this before that or something, but hilarious. Also very funny because both Deal and Rippling are YC companies, and YC posted this from the official Y Combinator account. So they're like, "We're here for the drama too." Just absolutely fantastic work. Congrats to the CoTool team. Really
it's lore now. It's lore now. The industry is going to move on. It's going to be great lore, and I'm going to be saying, "Send that watch to London."
Send that watch to London.
Still in 30 years because it's an iconic line.
Yeah, and we also got to give a shout out to Lee Marie Braswell, former colleague of mine at Founders Fund, now at Kleiner Perkins. Windsurf acquisition by OpenAI, followed by Neon by Databricks. Congratulations, LM. We have to have her on the show soon. What an epic month, year, career so far, LM.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
Just getting started.
A lot of people say that, and it's like, no, you actually are just getting started.
Yeah, no,
she's definitely started.
She started. Anyway, are there any other posts you want to go through, or should we get out of here? I think we should have Josh Steinman on to talk about industrial sabotage. It's a long thread. I don't think we want to go through it right now.
I saw this.
I mean, you put in a post about the CEO of Capital One is literally called Rich Fairbank, and I think that's enough for today. We already mentioned that to Josh Wolfe.
So good.
But
go find Josh's thread.
What a fantastic, image. Just Rich Fairbank.
Rich Fairbank. There's another person. I found it in Josh's thread.
Yeah.
Called who works for McDonald's and like some VP over there. Her last name is Hamburger.
That's great.
So good.
Fantastic.
Anyways,
thank you so much for watching.
I'm gonna end and just say thank you to Figma.
Yeah.
For supporting the show. They are our newest partner and one
redesign how you design.
I can't hide how excited I am.
You love Figma.
Like I said, I've been a DAU my whole career.
You were making memes in Figma like yesterday, sending them to Delian, and they were fantastic.
For Delian's eyes only.
Yes. Also, AdQuick, I think we might have missed them. Out-of-home advertising made easy and measurable. Say goodbye to the headaches of out-of-home advertising. Only AdQuick combines technology, out-of-home expertise, and data to enable efficient, seamless ad buying across the globe. AdQuick.com. Buy a billboard, folks.
Thank you to all of our partners. And again, our board of directors has... reminded us in a very forceful way that we have to ask you to go leave a review on
5 stars, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Do it now.
It helps us in some way.
We don't really know how, but
the board says,
demands it.
Our jobs are on the line.
Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in, folks.
We'll
we got another great show tomorrow. Looking forward to it.
Bye.
Cheers.